Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Matt, Heidi, Matt Pierce, and Chief Thomas.
Hey, who's running council PC? Pierce?
I was muted. We are. Council PC's us.
Okay. I'm gonna just try to show my presentation really quick just to make sure that we're not on yet, right?
Sorry, we are live.
Oh. Got it. Well, I'm still gonna show this title screen of my presentation to make sure it's ready to go for 6. Pierce, will you let me give that a whirl?
Yeah, sorry. There you go. You should be able to share now.
Can you see my screen then?
Yep.
Looks good.
Thank you. Except for now I can't figure out how to get it off.
You want me to do it for you, Matt?
I just have too many things open.
Ooh, that's a lot of icons.
Busy man.
A little bit. Hey, Matt Pierce.
Yeah.
Part of this is I've got several different screens up and running. So when I get to the end, I might need you to force stop my sharing.
Okay.
In case I have a challenge with that again. So I'll just give you the bat signal.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Chief Thomas, do you have your flag ready?
I do.
You're good, man. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I've got 6 o'clock, but I don't see Kane yet. I've got 6 o'clock, but I don't see Kane yet.
I'm here.
I see you.
There you are. All right, let's see. We got a quorum. We got Dustin, just coming down through my pages. Heidi, Dustin. Page 2. Paul. Well, there's a quorum. Who are we missing? Bryant and Quinn?
They will both be here, I'm sure.
Quite the background, Dustin.
Thank you. Colorful background today.
There's Bryant.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
It was connecting weird. I thought I was going to have to dial in, but I think I'm good now.
I'll just give Quinn a minute here. We're waiting for one council member to join us. Laura, do you want to give Quinn a call? See, make sure he's on his way.
Will do, Mayor.
What's that?
I said, yes, I'll do it right now, Mayor.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, Laura Lewis.
I was on mute. Thank you. Good to be here.
We look forward to your information.
Mayor Quinn, Councilmember Sperry said he's trying to get logged in.
Okay, thank you.
And I am hoping that my colleague, Kate Wirrett, is going to be joining soon.
Kate
He's
is
on.
Oh,
He's-
hello.
Yes, I'm on.
Okay,
I'm on.
sorry.
Hello.
And I guess there'll be no chocolate covered strawberries.
I know. I really dislike this virtual thing. I got it.
The worst of Corona just hit my mind now that you said that, Leslie. I'm disappointed. And I gotta go flip the lights on.
When we can meet again in person, I'll bring 2 for everybody.
Hey,
Mayor, we're just sending, Matt is sending Quinn the invite again to see if he can get logged in.
Excellent. He could always drive down here to my house,
You might have to.
share my screen with him. It's great to be first, Heidi. Then you can watch and listen to everybody else having problems getting in.
I'm just kind of wondering about this chocolate covered strawberry thing.
Wasn't that like part of the reason you ran? Because I told you about those.
That was the reason. Yeah, you had me at
That's
chocolate covered strawberries.
And then here I am where I can't deliver. That's unfortunate. So Heidi, I bill my chocolate covered strawberries as being health food because chocolate is good for you, eaten in moderation, and then you've got the vitamin C with the strawberries, right?
I completely agree with you until you said in moderation.
Oh. What was I thinking?
Chocolate's a bean too, so it counts as a vegetable.
There you go. There you go. I hadn't thought about that, Mayor. I'm going to add that into my rationale.
There's Quinn coming in.
Sorry about
Welcome, Quinn. Good. Thought your computer had COVID there for a minute. Okay, I'm going to call this special meeting to order at 6:08 p.m. I want to welcome everybody of the council, staff, and we have many visitors. And we appreciate having everybody. We're going to ask Chief Thomas to display his flag, and we're all going to stand. And if you would repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Somehow that doesn't have the same effect either. Okay, Rory, this is your time to shine.
Okay, Mayor. And then also I wanted to remind you to make sure and make the statement at the beginning about the anchor location. That's on the agenda. Did you get that?
What?
I will email it to you, a statement that we need to have you read about the anchor location. About not having a physical location. But I'll do it first.
Okay.
So, Councilmember Robinson.
Here.
Gettle,
Here.
Brown,
Here.
Barry,
Here.
and Glover.
Here.
Let's see, Mayor, this is at the electronic meeting. You have that, Mayor?
I have electronic city council meeting. The paragraph that starts this meeting will be an electronic meeting. The next one, as restrictions take place. Do I read that to everybody?
There's the paragraph, yes.
That first paragraph, this meeting will be?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know.
It's
Here we
okay.
go. This is an electronic city council meeting. I gotta shift it. I'm a little too far one side.
Mayor, is that not on the agenda? It's on the email I sent you.
This is on the email.
Determination by mayor?
No, I don't see that. Let me go. See if there's something I missed there that.
Yeah, if you've got that.
Oh, there's a Rory.
Okay.
Hold on. All right. This meeting will be an electronic meeting without a physical location pursuant to Utah Code 52-4-207 as amended by House Bill 5002. Mayor Robert Hale, as chair of the Midvale City Council, hereby makes the determination that conducting the meeting will, with an anchor location, presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. This determination is based upon the fact that the city is unable to ensure compliance with the guidelines and public health protocols mandated by the state's current risk phase.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'll have that memorized about the 10th time I do it. Let's see, now I gotta get back to the. I apologize. Okay, found it. All right. The next section calls for public comments. I'd like to begin by making a comment to my city. It's past, it's present and future. I am proud to say how well our city performed today and yesterday with the funeral services and memorials to our immediate past mayor, Joanne B. Sagini. It was a joy for me personally to participate in the audience on every occasion and to witness the seemingly endless praise that this great mayor of Midvale City for 20 years provided so many people an opportunity to serve and to learn and to be in a leadership role for so many years in school districts, in endless praise that this great mayor of Midvale City for 20 years feedback provided so many people. I extend an appreciative hand to all of our administration, the backroom folks, especially Matt Pierce, Chris Butte, and the others in IT that helped out, Kane Loader, and so many more of the administration that put together the city's part in this funeral and memorial. Just a personal appreciation to all of you. You all did very well. I was able to attend the memorial last night and to attend the rosary via Zoom today, and then the actual burial of her cremains. And everybody was just so wonderful. And I want to thank everyone who had a part to do with it. I don't know how, it's very difficult to see the passing of one who was such a part of Midvale for so long. I too was greatly blessed by her life and her actions. And I want to thank everybody who was able to get up and express some of those appreciations. Okay, we'll now open up to public comments. And I know Laura Magnus has received perhaps a dozen, and we've asked her to read those for us to get a feel for the comments from each of our citizens. Laura, would you go through those?
Mayor, am I reading all of the UPD public comments right now, or am I reading those during the agenda item?
We got a public comment in the agenda item?
No, they should be read now.
It should be read now?
Yes.
Okay. The first public comments I have are from Lorene and Vernon Butler. And they said that there's several comments I have that I'm about to read that are not on the agenda tonight, but I'm still reading them because people have asked for us to be read tonight on tonight's agenda. So I will start with those first.
Thank you.
Lorene and Vernon Butler are wanting to make sure that the city council knows that we need more restricted parking rather than loosening up parking. They want to voice their opinion as strongly as they can, objecting to reducing parking because it's very needed. People always have more than one car, so we need to make sure we're providing enough parking. She left that on a voicemail. I received an email from Kimberly Schlein, and she said, I am a homeowner off of 300 West, 3rd West. The council is considering reducing the parking requirements in RM25 zone. I feel that this would be a huge mistake. Millennial Street cannot handle the cars parked up and down the streets. As it is now, the street is so congested and getting through the light is a near joke. When the construction started, the workers parked along the sides of the street, and it was a hazard for all who came around the corners due to how tight it was when all cars are parked along the side. When it snows, it will be near impossible for the plow trucks to clear it as well as emergency vehicles. If you pass this, it will create a parking nightmare for the businesses in the area and also down Cottonwood Street in our neighborhood. The apartments you all allowed to be built is a nuisance as it is. I get to look out my bathroom and kitchen windows and wave at the new tenants, construction workers now. Please do not pass this. Thank you for your time, Kimberly Schlein. I also have a public comment from Amanda Hollingsworth regarding parking. I do not support decreasing parking requirements for developers or multifamily housing. Parking and snow plowing is already an issue we face each year. Rory, can you go on and see if we have any public comments on YouTube?
I have nothing on YouTube.
Okay. And Mayor, if we can wait just a couple minutes, we're having some technical difficulties with our Facebook page. I don't see the video up on, so I don't want to pass up on public comments until that video is on Facebook. Okay, it's on Facebook now. Thank you. I don't see any public comments on Facebook. So I'm going to start reading some public comments that we received regarding UPD. This is from Rena Beckstead. Council, as you take your very important vote on the future of policing for Midvale, I urge you to consider the professional services provided by UPD Patrol, in addition to the expertise provided by pooled services. Thank you, Rena Beckstead. And we received an email from the Mayor of Mill Creek, Jeff Silverstrini. Dear Mayor Hill and honorable Midvale City Council members, I am the Mayor of Mill Creek and I reside at 3400 South Crestwood Drive, Mill Creek, Utah. I have corresponded with Mayor Hill concerning Midvale's discussions concerning possibly leaving the Unified Police Department. I have also communicated with the residents of my city about the reasons Mill Creek will be staying with UPD. In case you have not seen them, I would like to share them with you. They are attached below. I respect your responsibility to provide police services for Midvale in the manner you deem best. However, I would encourage you to consider the reasons Midvale joined UPD years ago as a better option for policing than self-providing. I also encourage you to engage your Midvale police officers and listen to their views concerning the merits of Midvale self-providing versus belonging to a larger police force which provides more and better opportunities for training and advancement. Many of them may be timid about this as it is such a fraught issue for them. They feel powerless in a decision of great import to their futures. However, some have made their views known to fellow officers in Mill Creek. In fact, I am commenting to you now, at least in part on their request. As professionals who understand the benefits UPD provides to them doing their jobs in Midvale, their opinions are instructive. They believe Midvale should remain in UPD. Mayor Hill and I have worked hard with UPD board to improve financial transparency at UPD. I think we can now see that shared services are being managed efficiently. There are also benefits to UPD's relationship with the sheriff and Salt Lake County, particularly their financial contribution toward things which would benefit both Mill Creek and Midvale, such as the Metro Gang Task Force and the DEA Task Force, to name two, among many other shared resources. It would be unfortunate if those assets were less valuable to standalone Midvale PD. I appreciate that the cost of the things we share is significant, but I see the value in them. Our two communities share similar demographics and our residents need these shared resources. Within the past year, we have both experienced active shooter incident events, which have required mass callouts of police resources to protect us. Thank goodness we had a police department with adequate resources and manpower to respond effectively. I don't deny that we have more work to do to improve UPD. The protests we are seeing demand that we reimagine our police force and improve their training. Still, these things will be more easily done with critical mass and shared resources. Small departments historically lack funding for training, and they can't afford many of the things a larger department can. I urge you to consider the simple logic of economies of scale, which means that a small department simply will not have all of the assets we now enjoy by sharing costs. Midvale and Mill Creek make great partners. It is my hope that they remain such in UPD. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. We also received an email from Mayor Dolly from the city of Holiday. I have read Mill Creek Mayor Jeff Silverstrini's Silverstein's letter to the city council. I concur with his comments, so out of respect of your time, I'll simply endorse his position as being consistent with my sentiments. I would like to reinforce that we have acknowledged prior issues with regional services and have made significant progress, both with transparency and efficiencies in this critical area. My hope is that your council will not just weigh the monetary side of this issue, but also the value associated with the quality of service you receive as a member of UPD. I'm confident that working together, we continue to make progress within a regional service model that addresses the concerns that caused you to take this step without undertaking the monumental effort of standing up an independent police force. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to provide comment. We received another email from Manfred Lassig, to whom it may concern. I've been with the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office and Unified Police Department for numerous years and have witnessed agencies come in and out, always claiming that they're going to do a better and cheaper job. Shortly after Midvale came to UPD, they had a homicide of 3 people and the suspect was loose in the area. I responded from Mill Creek and coordinated the ground search, directing approximately 50 officers. While also going on in the area was the Violent Crimes Unit conducting the investigation and the SWAT team searching high-value targets for the suspects. At the time, City Manager Loader was amazed at the amount of resources that UPD was able to bring forth. Over the last few years, I've witnessed on several occasions that the resources UPD has been able to bring to problems. Other agencies will come in and help stabilize the situation, but won't be able to remain and handle calls for service. I've seen the calls handled through UPD. The current motivation to do it on our own has some serious ramifications. The equipment when Midvale came over was seriously downgraded, as some of the vehicles that were being driven were hazardous to the officers and public. Currently through UPD, equipment is maintained current and in safe condition. The specialized units of UPD are highly trained and bring a great amount of experience to cases they are handling. Smaller agencies normally have detectives that handle all kinds of cases. Victims and families deserve the best investigations possible. You should look at the example of Harriman and Riverton. Harriman's budget has gone up $3 million since they left, and Riverton has gone up $1 million in a year. As a resident of the area serviced by Midvale Precinct, I ask that you seriously consider your actions and stay with UPD. Thank you for your consideration, Manfred Lastig. Another email from Cody Hampton. I disagree with having Midvale leave UPD and believe Midvale should stay. There are many reasons why. Resources. The amount of resources are unmatched with UPD. It would be a lack of service to Midvale citizens to take these resources and the feeling of safety away. The Lehigh fire was handed over to UFA. Salt Lake City PD was beyond happy when they heard UPD was supporting them with the riot. Integrity. UPD is the most respected police department in Utah, and UPD has the officers to live up to the name. The knowledge and skill set of officers within UPD can offer its citizens are incredible because of diversity and experience within the office, something you cannot provide with a one-dimensional agency. Size matters. Officers have to be held accountable in a larger organization, and we are. UPD is hard on discipline, and in times like these, this is huge. But UPD also offers support with its size. When it comes to assisting other agencies, having top-of-the-line fleet vehicles, top-of-the-line equipment, top-of-the-line officers, top-of-the-line experience, and officers, UPD is unmatched and second to no other department. The citizens know this. With all these examples, why pull out of the best agency in the state of Utah? Why choose to give the citizens of Midvale less? Is it to save money? No, because UPD has done what the Council of Midvale has asked and will continue to do so. Do you choose to leave because the citizens and the city will be saving money? No, because you will go over your projected numbers in the first year, costing more than if you stayed, and you will have to make decisions on where to cut from. Midvale PD will already be inferior to UPD, and you will have to drop even more so. You have the best of the best already. The numbers and budget are transparent and becoming more so. And also, at this time, imagine creating a police force when police are being attacked. Sit back, relax, and allow UPD to lead UPD through these tough times. Allow UPD to build on its foundation, be a part of something great, and don't make the citizens of Midvale suffer due to a bad decision, because ultimately it's about the citizens we serve. The next one is an email from Karina Ellsworth. Don't defund the police. Defunding the police is going swimmingly in New York. Don't believe me? Watch these links. And she lists 4 links. If you don't think it'll happen here, I have news for you. They need more funding for better training, a city council who will stand up for them, and citizens need an education on what constitutes acceptable police use of force. We need these men and women in our communities. Margarita Santini. Dear Mayor and members of the City Council, I am writing to submit my thoughts on discussions of a potential Midvale Police Department. I implore you to stay with Midvale. I moved here from Cottonwood Heights and I saw firsthand the corruption, experienced the harassment, the exorbitant budget for the little real work they did, and the huge amount of fake work they created to justify more and more funding, like harassing my family nonstop for 10 years that I lived there and literally running us out of the city. It was such a horrible experience. And since moving here to Midvale, in the year I've been here, I've had to work with the police one time, and that was with my eldest son who has mental health issues. I would have rather the U of U taken him in because this should not be police work, but here we are. My family has never felt more safe, more happy, and feeling as if this is what a normal life is supposed to look like. Thank you for taking the time to read my comments. Our own police department would increase racial profiling, real work versus was this really necessary, a bigger price tag, and less money for much needed social programs, especially during this global pandemic. Thank you. Another email from Doug Wright. I don't think I read this one. I trust the intent of my message will be clear since it's something I have written some of you about before. I support our local police department and officers. I do believe that being part of the Unified Police Department is far too costly and that the city should not be paying increased charges from the Unified Police Department every year or every time they want up the bill to the cities. I do not agree with the term police defunding as it is currently being used in the media and among other groups who want to dictate that police departments be shrunk, disbanded officers be laid off, and dictate that money go to youth programs, etc. Thank you, Doug Wright. I have from Rena Beckstead, Council. As you take your very important vote on the future of policing for Midvale, I urge you to consider the professional services provided by UPD Patrol in addition to the expertise provided by pooled services.
Laura, I think we heard this one.
Okay, thank you. I tried to gather all of these before the meeting started, but we were interviewing with the media, so bear with me.
It's like, yeah, that sounds familiar.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, I also have from, did that one. This is from Mayor Paulina Flint from White City Metro Township. Dear Mayor Hill and honorable Midvale City Council members, I'm the mayor of White City Metro Township and I live at 10467 Carnation Drive in White City Metro Township, Utah. Our residents have been strong supporters of the UPD model. We have for decades supported our policing agencies, whether they were the original Sheriff's Department and or today's UPD form of policing. We really appreciate the relationship we have had with Midvale over our community's history. You gave us the support to remain independent since 1991. We are grateful to you for your kinship with White City. We respect your responsibility to provide police services for Midvale. We as Metros have the same duty to our public. We also recognize as a smaller municipality, we inherit the greater risk of liability for our decisions. Currently, we are living in a time where risks have magnified themselves far beyond what existed prior to 2011, at which time you joined the UPD. The validity of the situations we find ourselves in As municipalities, performing policing duties is no longer a simple equation of facts and figures. The heightened risk of emotions within our communities requires a deeper look into our responsibilities. As a new trustee on the UPD board, I understand your issues. We want this model to support all our needs equally. We need you to assist us in making the UPD model a shining star. The friendships of our officers, the trust our people share with our officers is a valuable tool in stabilizing the forces that would have us ripped apart. It is not about individual power. It is about respect that we are better together than apart. This is not a good time to venture out to explore options. It is a time to unify those that serve us to make and keep the peace. Mayor Hale and I have worked together when we were much younger and shared our cause-fighting ideas. The only constant is the stability we bring to our citizens. Without the tremendous resources our shared services provide for us, we could not offer the full array of service efficiently. We understand that we need to improve the UPD. The protests happening throughout our country require us to provide continuity of training of all of our policing agencies. Our shared services provide us the lowest risk management costs. Pooling our efforts brings protection to all of our efforts to effectively police our municipalities and secure the safety of each of our businesses and residents. Midvale is a sister community to White City. Our families shared the same beginnings. It is important for us to support your needs. Please consider the ultimate benefits to a shared services model and remain with UPD to help us make the UPD model a place for all of us. Thank you for your support as a community. This is from Johnny Ngo, NGO. Dear Midvale City Council, as president of the Salt Lake Valley Law Enforcement Association, I would like to first thank you for allowing us to have open dialogue with your city regarding the concerns from our membership. We are the labor organization which currently represents nearly 90% of all unified police officers. Over the past couple of years, we have enjoyed the relationship we have had with Mayor Hill regarding compensation and benefits. We believe this was a healthy dialogue as we addressed concerns within our membership and Midvale City. With the recent comments of Midvale discussing to separate ties with the Unified Police Department, coupled with Taylorsville City's intent to leave, it has caused great concern among the members of the office. To be quite frank, employee morale has reached an all-time low. We as the association believe this department is the greatest department to work for and recognize the partnership cities are a big reason why. Unified Police certainly provides the greatest investigative assets to your community and officers of your city, not to mention the other specialized groups provided to your citizens. We would hope you will consider several factors as you weigh your options. Presently, public safety officers are under attack. This is both physically and by tactics employed by the mainstream media. Let me be clear. We absolutely recognize the need for change in our profession, as well as the responsibility to be receptive to the needs of our community. The unfortunate byproduct of these attacks is the increasing number of officers leaving law enforcement profession. This is also compounded by the lack of qualified applicants seeking a career in law enforcement. The reality is our communities are facing a perfect storm. The expectation of law enforcement officers has never been higher. Whilst our numbers are depleting, the cost of replenishing will be much more significant in the future. There is a misconception. City police departments save money. Though there can be savings appreciated by having total control over a police budget, there are also unforeseen expenses and unanticipated catastrophic events. Economies of scale are a long proven standard of minimizing expenses. The quality and depth of service you currently receive could not be replicated with the same cost when going alone. The final matter, which I would urge you to strongly consider, is the idea of presenting a letter of intent to depart the Unified Police Department as a simple placeholder, which could later be rescinded. The negative consequences to our officers, in addition to the other challenges we are currently facing, would be nearly catastrophic. We would humbly submit you consider submitting such a letter only if your true intention is to separate from our agency. In conclusion, we believe in the Unified Police Department model of service. Do changes need to be made? No doubt. We hope to continue our working relationship together and offer our full cooperation to Midvale City in keeping our department as the premier law enforcement agency in our state. This comment is from Amanda Hollingsworth. I did not read her UPD comment yet, correct? Okay. It is not just the cost that you anticipate when you consider building a new police department. It's the hidden costs. It's the workers' compensation insurance costs. It's the automobile liabilities, directors and officers insurance costs. It's opening the door to be responsible for any misconduct or abuse. A few years ago, 3 women sued Salt Lake County for sexual abuse. 1 nurse sued as an officer tried to take blood from a patient. I believe the nurse case was just settled for $500,000. I implore you to demand more transparency and voting rights from Unified Police Department. I beg someone to take control of contract negotiations and play hardball. Let's not take this lying down. Okay. Rory, while I'm looking one last time for some comments, will you see if you have any additional comments on the YouTube?
I have nothing.
Okay. Just making sure I don't have any more. Okay, I do not have any more on my email. Let me double check Facebook. And I don't have any comments on Facebook. Those are the comments, Mayor.
Lori, did you get the one I emailed you?
Thank you for asking.
And I've got a couple that you didn't read.
Are you kidding me? Okay, let me look through this one more time. That's really, did you send them to me, Mayor?
I don't know. One of them just came at 6 o'clock, so no.
Okay. If you want to forward that to me now, Mayor, I will read it to you. I will read it out loud.
All right. You have one from a Brian Van Steenkist.
Let me look. One of the challenges is we've asked people to email me, but I know they emailed many different people. So we thank the public for bearing with us on this.
Okay, I just sent you Mallory Seyfried. Now I'll find the other one.
Mayor, I sent her the one from Brian Van Steensky.
You have that?
I thought I read that one. Let me see. This is from Brian. Is this,
We
okay.
talked
I
before.
thought I read this twice. Thank you. I am a homeowner. This is from Brian Van Steensky. Thank you very much. I am a homeowner and a resident that moved to Midvale in 2004 from Detroit, Michigan. I live at 116th East, 7660 South. I am writing to voice my support for leaving the Unified Police Department. I fondly recall the days of our community police force and the positive relationships they had with the people of Midvale. I lamented the switch to Unified, and I really noticed the change in police behavior and directly saw its negative effects on the community. Please seize the opportunity to end the relationship with Unified and return to a financially prudent community police force. Brian. Is that the one you just sent to me too, Mayor?
Yes.
Okay.
And then Mallory Seyfried. I sent you that one.
Can you send it to me again? A couple of the messages I received from you, Mayor, I think when you send from your phone, the message doesn't come through. I get a blank message. If you could send it to me one more time.
All right. Okay, there it goes.
Thank you. Okay,
Did it come through?
it didn't. It's still blank. Do you want to read it, Mayor?
Okay. I'm gonna go back to my inbox. All right, Mallory Seyfried. Dear Mayor Hale, I really hope you don't vote to step away from UP.
Did he freeze?
This seems like it's the most impossible thing to read.
PD.
You can't even get it from him.
We really need. I'm sorry?
Can you start that over, Mayor? You froze.
Oh, pardon me. Dear Mayor Hale, I really hope you don't vote to step away from UPD. Am I coming through okay now?
Yes, sir.
All right. The timing couldn't be worse. We really need our police officers to feel supported now more than ever and provided with more training, not less. I'm worried about the upcoming 4th of July. These Marxist groups that hate America will do something under the guise of fireworks. I'm sure you are aware of their plans for Gettysburg. There is a faction of this group here. My trainer and dear friend, Sheriff John, is currently serving his 48th year in law enforcement. I suggest you pay attention to his wisdom and heed his warnings. You should get on his email list. Now is the time to stand up for America and the individual. I do not envy your position, and I pray you will have the strength to stand up against Stephen. Sincerely, Mallory Napton. Did that come through okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Is anyone aware of these plans in Gettysburg as someone who grew up 20 minutes from Gettysburg?
Well,
Should I warn my family?
Mallory sent a whole host of links to different subjects outside of UPD, and I chose not to go to them. I haven't got time at 6 o'clock to do all that. But if you'd like them forwarded, I will be happy to forward those to everybody.
I'll pass it this time.
Any other public comments?
That is all the public comments, Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Laura. That was a magnanimous job you did. Okay, we'll close public comments then and go to the consent agenda. We have one item to consider the minutes of June 16, 2020.
Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any comments or questions? Rory, would you call for the vote?
Yes. Councilmember Sperry,
Aye.
Glover,
Aye.
Robinson,
Aye.
Brown,
Yes.
and Gettle.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next thing is item 4, discussion item, Midvale Police Department Feasibility Study Update. Matt, this is where you get on board.
Mayor, can I jump in real fast before we do this? There was
Sure.
quite a few public comments about parking. I know we're not doing like sort of our normal, we each get sort of a minute to kind of, or a few minutes to speak, but can I say something for a minute about that? Because I feel like it would be disingenuous to take public comments on that parking and not at least sort of acknowledge that we have those.
Well, I had one also on the RM25 parking for,
That's what I'm talking about.
yeah. If you want, I can read that one too.
Well, I think we already, they already read a few. I just don't know how we want to handle that, because normally we'd at least engage with the person if they're up front talking, if we were there, or sort of like in our, where we all kind of got a minute to talk about it. I just don't want citizens to think we're ignoring that comment, because it might come up to us again. They might not submit something again. So I don't know how we want to address that at the moment. Rory, have we done, what would be a good way to handle that, or anyone, if they'd want to jump in and sort of give some guidance, that would be great.
Well, we're going to have a public hearing on it. That's why people are, because they got the notice for the public hearing.
Yeah, but we're not having it today.
Well, yeah, no, because this is a special meeting for UPD. So we
I
should
guess-
probably discuss it.
I just want to acknowledge it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to at least acknowledge that we received them, and I guess we can save them for when we have if it comes to us on a public hearing. I just don't want people to think we ignored that, because I got a lot of comments on that.
Right.
And let them understand that it's going before the planning commission
Yeah.
before we're gonna see it.
Or
That's right.
if Matt, can you just explain for like 2 seconds how, so someone has asked for it, it's got to go to the planning commission, they have to vote, and then it comes to us. Is that correct? I think that's all we need to say. I think people just need to know the
Yeah.
process of that, because I got notice.
Well, I'm just repeating what you just said, but yes, a notice has gone out to residents that live near and in the RMF 25 zone because there is a proposed project that will be going to the planning commission that will, as part of that proposal, there is a request that we modify the parking requirements as it pertains to affordable housing units within that zone. And while we're not hearing it tonight, it will be going to the planning commission as these items all do. There will be a similar process where comments will be read during that meeting, during the public hearing, in order to make sure that the planning commission is aware of the thoughts and feelings on this request. And then after it is approved by once it is considered by the planning commission, then it will be presented to the city council for final approval or denial, as it were.
I think that's all we need to say. I just don't want people to think we completely ignore that. So sorry, Mayor, I didn't mean to cut you off either. Continue.
No problem. No, I didn't read that because I knew it was, the venue is yet future on that. So I didn't bring it up. Okay, back to the discussion item on the Midvale Police Department feasibility study update. Matt Dahl.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share my screen. I hope. And everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this evening, I will be talking to you about an update on the feasibility study that we have embarked on with regards to the potential of providing our own police department in Midvale. Before I do that, though, I just wanted to make one quick personal statement, which is that while I have always had a respect for the law enforcement professionals in Midvale, over the last 2 months, I've had an opportunity to observe and talk with them both during and after operations. I've also met with people in the back office type positions related to forensics and evidence. And I found everyone to be extremely professional and dedicated and up way later than I am on a regular basis doing their job. And I really appreciate the work that they do. And it is unfortunate that as we have these public policy and budget discussions, that we have to distill individuals down to numbers. It's a necessary exercise that we have to go through. But I do just want to make sure that our officers recognize that we do these studies because we think that there is a larger public policy purpose. And whenever we sort of distill them down to numbers, I want them to know that I'm thinking about them individually, and I appreciate the work that they do. So with that, here. The feasibility study has not been finalized yet. Some of the details in the presentation will be refined before the final version of the feasibility study is released in July. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll get that wrapped up. This presentation will expand beyond the findings of the feasibility study in order to provide some context. There will be information as part of this study that the council heard at the last city council meeting, but that I'm under the impression that there are probably more people in the public watching this particular presentation. And so I'm going to expand just a little bit and cover some of the things that we covered in the previous presentation. For this presentation, I'll be covering the feasibility study process, some of the considerations that went into the study, some data relative to UPD and Midvale's relationship, UPD and the withdrawal of Taylorsville, the startup process if we were to begin our own police department, discussion of the annual operations of our own police department, go over the major findings that we have currently, which are still preliminary findings from the feasibility study, address some of the unknowns, and then next steps. With that, as far as the feasibility study process goes, in April, we hired Lewis Young in order to fulfill our request for a police department feasibility study. They were primarily looking at it from a budget perspective, looking at what the cost of annual operations and the startup of a police department would look like. As part of that, we reviewed data from municipal police departments with a focus on Riverton, Murray, and South Salt Lake. The reason we focused on those communities is because Riverton was the most recent entity or community to leave UPD, and Murray and South Salt Lake have similar demographics and are located in a similar geographic area in the valley to us and have some similarities, and that's why we were focusing on them. We discussed budget implications of withdrawal with representatives of UPD. We interviewed police chiefs and experienced police officers in order to get more information that would be pertinent to our budget exercise. And then we prepared an updated preliminary pro forma and preliminary police department comparison data for these discussions. As far as considerations go, I think the first and foremost is that we really should have been calling this more of a budget comparison study or something like that rather than a feasibility study, because right off the bat, the answer is yes, we can provide a police department. It is within the ability of the city council to say, form a police department with a budget of $8 million, and we would determine how many officers and vehicles and things like that would be that we could afford with an $8 million budget. However, what we've been doing is we've been saying we're trying to provide comparable services to what UPD provides and then showing what that budget would look like. And so Midvale has provided a police department in the past, and as I was saying, we could do it again, but really it comes down to the issue of cost and service and control. UPD is a political subdivision of which we are a member. Collectively, the members are UPD. The reason I bring that up is that I think some people sometimes get a misperception that we contract with UPD to provide services, much like you would contract with a builder or something, and that we have that sort of separate ownership responsibility. But the reality is we are part of UPD, and that makes our relationship different than that contracted responsibility or relationship that I mentioned a second ago. And as such, when we joined the organization, there were fewer members and our votes on all issues carried more weight. And over time, we've allowed more members to join UPD, and that has subsequently diluted our ability to vote on certain issues. And so while our membership hasn't necessarily changed, some of our control over their organization has. Next, I just wanted to point out that every police department is different. And I think that as I've talked with different representatives from different police departments, and as they've discussed what they think would be appropriate for the operation of a police department, there's a lot of different views on what that takes. And in the end, what's going to need to be done is that the city council, in coordination with staff, will work on developing proposals and policies, developing policies for law enforcement in Midvale. And that will then lead to the operations plan for the department, and that will lead to the final budget. Each community has different demographics, different expectations for service. And so that's why every police department is in many ways different. The feasibility study took a very conservative approach to estimating costs. Whenever there was sort of a ability to say that maybe we could find a way to cut costs, we did not include that in our estimates for what it was going to cost to run a budget unless we could actually validate that it was something that would happen. The last thing that we want to occur is to create a police department and have a major increase in the budget for that department the following year. And so most of our numbers are going to be based on a very conservative approach. There's a few exceptions to that, which I'll cover as I go through the document. That's important as we get to the final numbers, that we're remembering that these are really kind of looking at the idea of sort of being on the low end of the worst case scenario or the high end of the worst case scenario. That's what the range really means when we get there. There will be opportunities to partner with other communities and achieve additional savings not shown in the feasibility study. We did not ask the consultants to assume that we would be able to form any of these partnerships because we wouldn't be able to truly quantify what kind of savings we would have. And we didn't want to make assumptions before anything was solid. And so if the determination is made that we would withdraw from UPD, one of the first things that I would be doing would be working on trying to set up one of these partnerships. One last consideration is that really in a lot of ways, this discussion is one of control versus service plus cost. In 2011, when we looked at joining UPD, the decision was made that the higher level of service and the lower cost in 2011 was worth ceding some control to become part or become a member of this larger organization. And while the study really only covers the cost with a little bit of a discussion of service, it doesn't really cover control. But in the larger discussion of should we form our own police department or should we stay with UPD, it still comes back to this idea of control versus service and cost. And so I hope those are things that are considered as we go through this presentation. Now, I just want to cover a little bit of data and clarify some things that we have discussed in previous meetings. And again, hopefully provide some education to those who are watching for the first time. This chart shows how much the increases have been in our fees that we have paid to UPD. Now, one of the things you'll notice in the title of this is that we say this is net, the state homeless grant. Back in 2017, and then through a couple of years after that, we've been hiring officers to work with the shelter in order to address issues that are there. And that was something that we opted into, and increased costs came with those additional officers. But for the purposes of this and for an apples to apples comparison, we have netted out those expenses for the purpose of this exercise. Now, when we look at what the total increase has been in our cost relative to the services provided by UPD, we've had an average of a 4.2% increase annually. Now, what that means is that we've had about a 1.3% increase in our direct cost or our precinct costs, which is a very manageable amount of increase. However, our shared services have increased by annually by an average of 11.4%. And that is something that is less manageable. Now, there is a reason for that, that particular increase. And as we look at this chart, we again show the average increase that Midvale has experienced, which is the 11.4% over the time we've been in UPD. And that shows that average cost increases for shared services have been about 5% for UPD. Now, one of the big factors that have led into this is that part of the formula that determines how much each member community pays towards shared service is based on the number of calls that community has. Around 2017, we experienced a high number of calls, and that resulted in the 3-year average of calls that is used for determining what the shared cost would be. That increased our participation in funding shared services by a significant amount. Now, it is anticipated that with a moderating of those calls, that our overall contribution to shared services will decline. But again, that's going to continue to be directly related to the number of calls that we have, as well as some other factors. But that's one of the biggest things that has contributed to our increase. So just want to make sure that that is clear. The next thing I want to discuss is the issue of fund balance. Now, first and foremost, I just want to point out that in the letter that we sent out as part of the potential action of the council, the notice of withdrawal, in there, we make a reference to the fund balance declining by 49% over a period of time. That was put in there by mistake, and I will take responsibility for letting the letter go out with that incorrect number in it. But I do want to cover fund balance quickly because even though we got that number wrong, and overall the issue of fund balance is not one of the larger issues, I do want to just clarify a couple of things. First, as you can see in this chart, the total amount of fund balance that UPD has maintained, which has been around 10%, has been pretty constant. Additionally, the gray line represents the amount that they have been using for budget purposes, which up until the 2020 budget had been increasing. And I apologize, we had some number issues with regards to 2020 and the tentative budget for 2021. But I do want to say that in conversations with UPD, they have been working on trying to resolve some issues that have impacted their general fund and the fund balance, and that some of the issues that we have been citing with regards to the use of fund balance should be declining in the future budgets. But overall, has been a problem to use that much fund balance as a budgeting tool. And we think that this could all be resolved with a policy regarding the use of fund balance within the organization. But like I said, I just wanted to clarify a few things, discuss that there is still some concerns about the use of fund balance, indicate that UPD is working on making some changes with that and have done so in the 2020 budget and are continuing to do that in the 2021 budget, but that there were still some concerns and that we'll need to make a modification to the letter when that time comes. Now, the next thing I want to cover is the withdrawal of Taylorsville from UPD. As most of you know, last week there was an indication, or Taylorsville indicated that it is their intent to withdraw from UPD. Over the last several years, there have been three, including Taylorsville, three organizations that have left or will leave UPD. And while there was an impact on all of the members when Harriman and Riverton left, those impacts were relatively small, both because of just their overall budget size and the ratio of their participation in UPD budget-wise, 6% and 8% respectively for Harriman and Riverton. Taylorsville is much larger and will have a much larger impact on the organization when they leave. They have a budget of around $11 million, represent 15% of the budget, and they represent changes of about $4.2 million would need to be made to shared services or elsewhere in the organization in order to compensate for Taylorsville leaving. Now, UPD has indicated that it is their intent to make every effort to keep the withdrawal of Taylorsville as a neutral impact financially on the remaining members of UPD, while also attempting to maintain officer safety. In order to do that, significant cuts to shared services will be required in order to achieve that neutral impact on the remaining members. The details of these cuts and their impacts on service levels have not been determined. And I know UPD is working hard on it. This is one of the things that even up until today, we've still been having some discussions about what the impacts of that will be. However, the reality is that Taylorsville will be in UPD for another year, and the FY22 budget, or the next budget after FY21, will be where those cuts are reflected in the budget. And while it is the intent of the administration in order to make the impact neutral on the other members, it really still comes down to the UPD board voting in order to determine what that budget looks like for FY 2022. And it is possible that they could determine that they either want to absorb more cost by the individual members or try to achieve this neutral financial impact. But a lot of those decisions, while we can talk about the direction we're going, the decisions won't be made until that time, which makes some of the exercise that we're doing in this feasibility study that much more difficult because of that. The next thing I want to talk about is what does starting up our own police department really mean to us? So if we were to issue the notice to withdraw from UPD, that would give us 12 months. We'd be, as of right now, under the draft letter that we put together, we'd be looking at starting our own police department on July 1st of 2021. In that 12-month period of time, we will need to develop and adopt law enforcement policies. Now, that ranges from things that could make significant impacts on how the organization operates and could have budget impacts. That would also mean coming up with policies with regards to the use of force and things like that, but we would need to have those in place by the time the department officially starts. In addition to that, we would need to be working on securing contractual relationships with other communities in order to determine what services we will be able to share with them. Some examples could be potentially, later on I will discuss that we may need to build our own evidence storage facility. Maybe there would be an opportunity for us to work with another community to develop an evidence storage facility. There might be opportunities to share canine officers or investigations. There are things that we will look into that may save us more money, and that'll be something that we'll have to start in earnest if a letter is issued. The next thing is we need to secure startup financing. What I gather as part of this process is that that shouldn't be a difficult thing for us to do. However, that in some senses is going to be the actual the actual trigger to saying that we are starting our own department. While we are going to release the letter, we could be releasing the notice of withdrawal until we take in those funds in order to finance the startup. There is still the possibility that an arrangement, changes in UPD could be made, and we wouldn't have to actually leave UPD if we issue that notice. But once we receive the financing for the startup, that's pretty much seals the deal. We will need to negotiate the financial withdrawal from UPD. I'll talk about this a little bit more, but there is an exit formula that is part of the interlocal agreement. The exit formula was approved in April of 2019. And as part of that, there are a variety of things that are covered that I think there's room for negotiation because there is a lot of difference of opinion of what it really means. In the last meeting, and I'll cover this a little bit more, but the biggest of those issues has to do with the pension obligation to a member that is leaving the organization. Some of that depends on how many officers from UPD would come to Midvale to work. That would have an impact on the pension liability. Additionally, there is some difference of opinion as to whether or not that pension liability is a paper cost or is an actual dollar cost. And so those are some of the things that we would have to work out pretty quickly in order to make sure that we have an understanding of what the needs are for the department after a notice of withdrawal is released. In addition to that, we would have to spend that 12 months staffing up. That would include hiring a chief relatively early on to help us establish the department and some of our policies. After that, and later in the year, we would be hiring officers. Right now, we're estimating between 52 and 56. I'll cover that a little bit further. And then 10 to 12.5 civilians. Again, that would be all happening in the next year. We would have to put out a fairly significant capital outlay. Some of this would be for the renovation and upgrade of the Midvale precinct. While this, I want to be very clear, this item is not perceived to be a large item. There may be some need for some reconfiguration of some of the space in there, as well as some new technology in order to integrate with Midvale's system, but there will probably be some costs associated with that. The much larger expense would be if we have to create our own evidence storage facility. We anticipate that we may need up to 3,500 square feet. If we have to buy property, design, and build that, that could be a pretty significant cost for us and something that we would have to have, again, done before our new police department started. Then we would have to lease and outfit approximately 60 service vehicles. That's one vehicle for every officer plus a few spares in case any of them get damaged. And then we need to acquire the firearms, uniforms, technology, et cetera, that the individual officers will need in the new department. On the one hand, there are high costs associated with the startup. On the other hand, we will have new tools at our disposal with that new department. In addition to that, we'll have to work on the transition from UPD. We anticipate that as the year goes on, there will probably be some difficulty in hiring some officers for UPD to fill some of the spaces as we get closer to our own department starting. In addition to that, we will have to be taking in some of our the evidence that remains with UPD that we sent to them in 2011. Some of that pertaining to large, significant crimes, violent crimes, would need to be returned to Midvale, and so we'd have to work on that, which is a difficult process actually because of chain of custody issues and things like that. So the transition from UPD will be a challenging part of the process. Now, as we look at our annual operations, some of these numbers I talked about before, I'll go into them just a little bit more detail. For the purposes of our exercise, we were looking at having a department with a total size of 62 to 68.5 staff. 52 to 56 of those, we'd look at have it being officers, detectives, etc. Right now, under this budget exercise, what we're looking at is maintaining the number of patrol officers, with there being 4 shifts, and each of those shifts having 5 officers and 1 sergeant. And then the major thing that has an impact on the number of officers actually comes down to the number of investigators that we'll have. The 56 number represents a staffing plan that would provide us with more specialist detectives dealing with issues of major crimes, mental health crimes, special victims, auto accident, more specialty officers. As we move down to having closer to the more 52 officers, that would be reflected through a reduction in the number of detectives that we would have. And what would result is that we would have more detectives that would be generalists in order to get down to that number. There are some other officer positions that we did not include in this number, but that were recommended by different chiefs, not all of them, as far as what we would need. And particularly that would have to do with the number of officers that we'd have available to participate full-time in task force set up by the state or federal agencies. We do not include them in there, and what we would anticipate is that some of the officers within this 52 to 56 would cover some of those in a part-time capacity. But like I said, I just wanted to point out that there are recommendations for additional officers that are not included in this count that we have heard from some individuals. In addition to the officers, we would have 7 to 9 civilians in the department. Those civilians would cover things like records management, evidence management, and forensics, as well as some of your standard office support staff. That's what gets us to 7 to 9. And then the other thing that we know that we will need is some additional staff that will be part of other departments in the city. Most notably, those would be IT, with the number of computers and other technological devices that our police officers would have. We would need to have at least one more IT person to manage that. We would be almost doubling the size of Midvale staff. And so for that reason, we know that we would need another HR staff member in order to deal with the issues with that expanding staff. And then we believe that at least in the early years, we'll likely need a part-time attorney to deal with some of the issues that will be coming out of operating our own police department. Now, as we've made our calculations on what the annual operation cost would be, and we look at benefits, we anticipated that the benefits would be similar to what UPD currently offers. Those will be different than what standard Midvale staff receive, in large part because law enforcement officers are able to retire after 20 years as opposed to the 30 years that most staff members are. And so that changes their benefits slightly. And then as we were looking at salary, what we did is we looked at the median salary for the market, and we based our detective and officer salaries off of that. Now, that increases the salary over what UPD offers, but it does not put us into the upper 5 or so agencies in the state. Now, one of the policy decisions that the council could make is that we want to increase our salary in order to be in one of those higher wage communities. Or the other thing that could happen is that, as we know, there have been some challenges and some things that may be making it look less favorably to go into law enforcement. And there is the potential that it might be more challenging to find officers in the future, and things like that, sort of on a supply and demand basis, may make it necessary to increase our salary higher than even what we've anticipated in order to bring in the most capable officers into a Midvale Police Department. And so this is one of the categories, salary, where we might not have been as conservative as we have been in some of the other areas. However, even increasing the salary to be at the median point of the market still makes it so that we have our proposed budget has a huge increase, and that will come into play in a little bit when I talk about the range of costs for annual operations. The next thing is that, of course, as part of those operations, we'll have ongoing maintenance costs, though because we'll have new vehicles, new facilities, new technology, some of that maintenance will not be as high in those early years as they will be sort of later on. And that comes into play as we look at our financing of the startup costs, which I'll cover in a second. In addition to that, one of the comments that was made by the public had to do with how this is going to impact our insurance. We've done some initial estimates on how that will impact our insurance. And it looks like, again, on the conservative side, that it could increase our insurance budget within the city by about $155,000 a year. That includes your basic liability, workman's comp, and some of those other categories of insurance. It is, we know that running a police department will have more incidences that will require claims to be made. That includes accidents with cars, that will include officers getting injured in the line of duty, and things like that, that we don't currently have to deal with as much within the city. And so that will be a big change to our overall organizational operations. Now, as we take all of that into consideration and look at our preliminary findings, what we have found is that we anticipate that the startup costs that would occur in the next budget year, again, that's FY21, it starts tomorrow, is that there would be a range of about $5.1 million to $7.4 million. Now, again, I want to point out, this is important to be clear on. This is sort of the low end and high end of the worst case scenario based off of our understanding of what the exit formula could result in. Now, between negotiations as well as market conditions and how that impacts the actuarial tables related to pension liabilities and a whole host of other factors, how many officers join the Midvale Police Department from UPD, there are a whole host of factors that could significantly impact this number. And so again, we're showing you what the worst case range would be. Now, based off of those startup costs, we would need to finance them. And the FY22 budget, while that is the operational budget, which ranged from 8.7 to 9.8 million, again, that range is all based off of what that exit formula, I shouldn't say all, I apologize, I take that back, is largely based on what that exit formula is going to be. And so if we are able to reduce that number, then that annual budget costs will go down dramatically as our financing costs also go down. The assumption that we made for our financing is that we would pay it off over 10 years and that it would have an interest rate of about 3%. And so that's how we come to those numbers and everything else that I talked about earlier in the presentation. Now, as we look at what the FY21 and FY20 fee and budget have been for UPD, we can compare what we think the operational costs will be relative to what we've been experiencing with UPD. Now, for the FY21, again, the budget that starts tomorrow, our fee for services is about $8.9 million. Now, our actual budget is $9.4 million. And the difference there it comes down to the amount of fund balance that is used in order to reduce our fee. And so as we look at a comparison with our FY22 budget up above, in sort of, again, that low range of the worst case scenario, we would achieve a small amount of savings relative to what our current fee is for this next budget year. On the high end, though, we could be paying a significant amount more for operating our own police department, again, largely due to the exit formula and the financing of that. Now, the couple of things I'm repeating from earlier, but I just want to point out is that our budget numbers include paying our officers more than what UPD currently does. And so the savings that we could achieve if we were paying a comparable salary would again give us a lot more savings than what this could potentially show. But it is important to understand that there are factors that we cannot know at this point in time that we will work on in order to determine what that final budget number is. But the reality is that until we know how many officers come over, we won't be able to finalize what that budget is for FY22. So that is one of the things that increases the risk as we look at this potential withdrawal from UPD. Now, as we look at the preliminary findings and do a comparison with some of those other communities, just to quickly point out how this is working here is that the top two are what would happen if we were to form our own police department, and it is the difference between if we use the maximum number of officers that we're looking at, a smaller number. So that's what the top two rows are, and then we do the comparison with those other communities. When I gave this presentation last time, 2 weeks ago, because we didn't have the financing numbers plugged in, these comparisons had a look differently. And in most cases, our costs were lower than the average. But with that increase due to the financing, in some of these cases, we are exceeding the average. So as we look at the difference between 56 officers and 52 officers, you can see that the average for 56 exceeds the average for those other communities by a decent amount, about $20 an officer, or I'm sorry, per capita. When we get down to the 52 officers, though, we then are less than that average. And so there is a big difference in those numbers. Additionally, we can look at what the difference is in the cost per officer. In both instances, 56 or 52 officers would exceed the average, again, of those three communities. As we look at the cost per call with the different amounts that we project for our first year of operation, we would see that with the highest number of officers, we would basically achieve what is the average cost per call. And that is oftentimes viewed as being one of the best indicators of if your costs are right-sized for your community. And in this case, it is right around the average. As far as calls per officers go, that ranges from 502 to 540. Again, that would exceed, though, the number of calls that we see on average. So this brings us to going back to some of the unknown factors that I had talked about earlier. So the first big one, again, is how do we handle the UPD withdrawal? What does that final number look like? That is one of the biggest areas where we'll have some difference in what we're projecting versus what the actual is potentially. We hope that it'll be lower. Then there's the asset distribution. This comes down to we provided UPD with cars and guns and computers and a variety of different assets. There was an indication at the time that we joined that we would get back what we put in if we left. And we are going, if a letter is issued, we would have to continue to work on what that really means. If we provided a 2011 Chevy Impala, do we get back a 2011 Chevy Impala, or do we get back a 2020 Chevy Impala, for example? And then the final thing, and I mentioned that before, is the partnership opportunities. How do those allow us to reduce the costs? We'll start that exercise as soon as we, if a letter is issued, we would start that exercise, and that would also help us get to a more defined budget number. So with that, as I mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, the next step where we have not completed this feasibility study yet, our intent is that we would do that in the next couple of weeks, and that in the meantime, we will continue to refine some of the assumptions that we made that resulted in the preliminary findings. Those things that I indicated in the previous slide that were unknown, most of those will not have detailed enough information to move them out of the unknown column. However, one of the things that we will be particularly focused on working on in the next 2 weeks is what the impact of Taylorsville leaving UPD will have on our organization. And then, of course, the other thing is that we will create a final feasibility study document that we will provide to the city council members and the public that shows what our final findings are on this. With that, we have representatives of Lewis Young here, Kate Warrett and Laura Lewis. And I also know that as you have questions about this, we also have representatives of UPD participating in the meeting. And I would be happy to answer any questions or ask any of the people who are participating in the meeting to answer the questions that I don't know. Let me stop sharing.
Matt, I'm sure we're all going to have a lot of questions now, but my first question is, if we did this bonding for the money, how much would we end up? It's so difficult because you can't really give us a number, but take both of those numbers and how much would we be paying back of any of those amounts?
So while we would have the ability to, so the way my computer is set up right now, to see you and my information, I have to look over here, which is not looking at my screen. So I apologize for that. But
I do not take offense.
So what we have proposed as far as this feasibility study goes is that basically we would finance the entirety of that startup cost. Now, there are a variety of ways for any of these things that we can sort of reshuffle how we handle them. And so, for example, we could go into our CIP, for example, and maybe use some of those dollars to cover some of those startup costs. We don't have a lot there, but I mean, that could reduce how much we finance. There's other mechanisms, but what we're looking at right now would be using a tool that we would renew on an annual basis. It's not bonding. It's Laura, what's the term again?
They're called tax anticipation notes.
Thank you. So we would have to renew those on an annual basis. The interest rate would fluctuate. We used conservative interest rate on that, but we anticipate that we would pay that back over 10 years. And so there would be a significant amount that we would be paying beyond the direct startup costs for the interest on for that financing. I don't have that number right offhand.
So Councilmember Gettle, how that works under state law, local governments are not allowed to borrow for operational expenses using long-term debt. Don't we wish the federal government had similar rules? Okay, I will not go down that rabbit hole. So given that, you know, when these startup costs are largely operational, you know, your salaries and benefits are, you know, probably 65K, and Matt probably knows the number, you know, 65 to 80% of the cost of running a police department. Obviously, that number changes as Matt spoke to if you need, you know, a new building to house evidence. But since most of those are operational costs, the non-operational costs, your capital costs, I could do on a traditional long-term bond, and it could be, you know, over. I mean, if you do a building, I could do that over, you know, 30 years. We can do equipment leases for the police cars; those are capital expenditures. But the operational expenditures, what we have to do is go through a process year after year after year. Salt Lake County does it, you know, every year. I think Salt Lake City almost does it every year. But we would work with Kyle, and we would take into account what your monthly, you know, new expenses would be with the, you know, inclusion of these new police officers. And we show that there's a deficit, and then we can fund with the short-term note. We're allowed under state law to fund those deficits. The idea being when you finally get your taxes, right, when those tax revenues come in, you'll use those to pay off, but there's a timing mismatch with when you need to notify that you're going to leave if that's what you choose to do. There's a timing mismatch between doing that and collecting the taxes to effectively catch up with that. So over time, what typically happens is, we'll issue a series of tax anticipation notes year after year after year, and typically we'll see those decrease as you sort of start to play catch up in your tax rates and the timing. Rather than put my staff through the torturous, idea of running 10 different tax anticipation note scenarios, how we model that from an assumption standpoint is just to assume we would do one long-term 10-year transaction. That was sort of our reasonable assumption to get there.
Okay, thank you. I guess my issue that I'm having is, we're saying that it could cost, $7 million for startup, but what we pay back could be significantly higher than $7 million. So it's kind of, it's like buying the shiny new computer that's $1,000, but you pay $1,500 for it.
That's exactly what it'll be. So if we're really talking about this, cost savings are not going to be what we would anticipate, I don't think. If it's actually just budgetary items that we're looking at.
If we take the conservative approach to it, that's what it shows, is that there's not much cost savings or any. However, like I said, there are a variety of factors that we can work on in earnest if we were to issue a letter of withdrawal, that we could then try to firm up what some of that would be, the partnerships and that kind of stuff that could get us some more cost savings. But again, we can't necessarily bank on those. And that is one of the reasons that we sort of talk about, it is possible, I'm not providing guidance here, but I'm just saying it is possible to issue the letter of withdrawal. And then as we work on some of those other issues, if it appears that we're going to be on this higher end, you could theoretically withdraw that letter at that time, but that's the situation.
My second question may be for Chief Mazarin or Thomas. I saw Maz here. I don't know if Chief Thomas is here. But I want to get a sense of just real world talk. What does UPD look like in 2021 without Taylorsville? And what does it look like in 2021 potentially without Taylorsville and Midvale?
Chief Mazarin, if you're here, do you want to speak on that? If not, I'll be happy to.
Yeah, I'll just maybe quickly, we've only had essentially a week to, we've actually, that's not accurate. For the past few months, we've looked at some contingency scenarios just to try to be better prepared. But when we got notification from Taylorsville, I sat down with our CFO and went through an exercise to look at what kind of cuts we'd make to the shared services so that wouldn't only not impact Midvale, but any of the partners of EPD. It would require some significant reorganization. And I think we'd really prioritize, we looked at prioritizing our most important shared services that everybody benefits from in the investigations and some of the other operational areas. We arrived at that number, that I think it was 4.2, and it won't be easy. I think it would be felt mostly within the department, but it is doable. And, we're having some discussions about really reinventing the UPD model and taking a really hard look at what it is now and making some changes that would, that it would look different. But there's also sometimes when you have these kind of situations, there's opportunities, and I think we'd be looking for opportunities to make it stronger and more robust than it was last year. And continue with our process of building and refining.
Well, and that's what the sheriff said in one of the interviews I saw that she did. She mentioned that she thought this was, while sad to see a member city go, that this could be an opportunity to make what's left even better. So I'm just,
That's absolutely correct.
I'm struggling. I want someone to explain how that's possible, because it sounds great. Sorry, we're getting some feedback there, but it sounds great, and I want that to be true, but I also don't think that we've gotten an explanation of, you know, other than sheriff wanting to do that, what's actually possible, you know?
Well,
I didn't realize it's only been a week, so I know you probably haven't sat down and done everything that needs to be done to be able to answer that, but anything at all.
Yeah, I know, I understand. It has only been a week, but you know, some of the discussions we've been having are kind of what's the philosophical approach we're going to take as we face some of these challenges, and you know, can we make this work without eroding it to the point where it just doesn't make any sense anymore? And I think, you know, I think there's an opportunity here. But I'll just speak very frankly to the council. I appreciate you asking. I think we're better together than we are apart, especially with some of the things going on right now. And you know, we'd like to continue our good partnership and continue to, you know, these things take time, and we've worked very hard the last 2.5 years, and we'd keep going. I don't know if you have anything, Randy, that you want to add.
What I'd like to say is I'm very impressed by Matt Dahl and Kyle Maurer with the study. They allowed me, along with the representatives that actually did the feasibility study, and I apologize for not memorizing your names. I can read them, but I think it's accurate. I think there are still unforeseen costs that no one can anticipate, but I think it's for the most part fairly comprehensive, and that's refreshing. I've heard nightmare stories about feasibility studies in the past. They asked for some input, which I think was critical, that I gave them, that could probably only come from an experienced police perspective regarding some of the operational assets and perhaps their end of life or their total life, and as well as, you know, the input as to being a partner to your state and federal agencies and task force. That's a huge component, and it's very difficult. I know when I served on the DEA Metro Task Force, we had times when partners could not afford to let officers come with us full time, and it hurts. It really does hurt these task forces that work at a high level, and it, you know, not just statewide but nationwide and global. So well done from what I can see, Matt. I appreciate it. I think it's out there. It gives, I think, the council. I heard, in fact, Councilman Brown, I believe it was about 2 years ago, asked for something just to know what your dollar gets, and I think it's been well done. So I appreciate that. I think it gives the council a good perspective on at least ballpark starting your own agency up. So if you have any questions for me, please bring them. But as you know, between myself, Chief Mazurn, our commitment is absolutely for our people and our councils and our UPD partners.
And just to throw in there also, the sheriff just called me and she's watching. She's watching the stream, but she agrees with what's been said, and changes have been made, and those are what Randy referred to with the budget, and we're going to continue to make changes as we evolve, whether, you know, if Taylorsville leaves and whatever Midvale decides to do, we're going to continue to evolve this organization the best we can make it.
My fear is, and I've used this metaphor a couple of times this week, no one wants to jump off of the Titanic onto the Lusitania. And that's what I'm fearing that we're heading into. You know, if we decide to stay and UPD, because Taylorsville pulled out, and Riverton and Harriman before them, you know, I don't want the ship to be sinking and us, you know, jumping off onto something that's doomed to fail as well. So it's been a very agonizing few weeks. You know, I'm speaking for myself. I don't know about the other council members, but more than any other decision that we've made so far, this one has been the most difficult and weighed the heaviest on me personally.
Dustin, sorry to interrupt. I think one thing I'd like to qualify on what you said was that we have provided a police department before, and we can provide a police department before. And where the issue is would end up coming is not that our police department would fail as much as it is that, and what you have to evaluate is, would the level of service meet the needs of the community or be similar to what UPD provided. So I don't think anyone on our end believes that it would fail. It's just that service provision.
No, yeah, and I don't mean to say that if we did our own police department, it would fail. What I'm saying is there's the potential that it could, or just be disastrous in its rollout. But more so what I'm saying is that next fiscal year, UPD as a model fails and we didn't get off on time or in time. So, I mean, either way you look at it, there's a very high risk potential for us in either decision that we make.
Yeah, Councilman Gittle, I see what you're saying. One thing I will, and I think everyone here realizes is when we onboarded Lisa Dudley, our CFO, the ball of twine that she untangled and then turned into a proper budget is outstanding. It gives me a lot more ability to predict, at least from the precinct level, and you know, obviously the regional services level, what our budget's going to look like. The real driving factor with these costs over the years, you know, and like your feasibility vendor said, you know, she mentioned up to 80%. We've identified it as 87% of your employee compensation drives that cost, and we're in a pickle right now as far as police. It really is. I mean, the COVID stopped all post training. I know I've said this. I might sound like a broken record, but we're hurting for officers right now, and it's not going to get any better. In fact, the current situation, we're going to have to do our best no matter how we can. There have been some great communications where I've been able to, in essence, bring some concerns of council to the sheriff or to Chief Mazarin and get you immediate feedback. I look forward to that in the future. So, you know, that might alleviate some of those budgetary worries or woes for the future, but I think we're on a lot more predictable path. And you've seen where we've started tracking our caseloads, and, you know, obviously that 2017 anomaly is going to go away, and everything prior to that and after that's been very predictable. Even with the current trend now with, you know, the COVID and the civil disorder here and there, we're still staying on top of it. So we'll do our best to stay on course. Staying on top of it. So we'll do our best to stay on course.
Do you, are you able to say, would anyone be willing to comment? Just, I know you don't want to think about 2021 without Taylorsville, without Midvale, but if that were the case, do you see UPD being able to survive as the model that it is today? Because Laura read so many comments, and one after the other was people just saying UPD is the premier police force in the state. And there are a lot of people who agree with that. But why are our cities pulling out of this most premier police force in the state then? You know, there's kind of a, doesn't match up.
I'll let Chief Mazarin speak on that behalf if you'd like, or I'd be certainly happy to. You still there,
Or at
Maz?
Or at least the second part. You don't have to, I know it's not going to benefit you or anyone else to say, yes, UPD will fail if Midvale and Taylorsville pulls out. So
No.
scratch that. But the second part, you know.
I can speak on it. Actually, it looks like Maz is off mute, but I will say that there's a very firm commitment from the mayor of Mill Creek, Mayor Silvestrini, and you know their wish is obviously it would be a huge blow. Taylorsville is a huge blow, but it may be, you know, it's philosophical how we reinvent that wheel. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We would prefer to tighten up the spokes, if you know, per se. But the shared service model works, and we're committed to it. I've said that over the years, and I've seen the frustration. I think the communication. I think I can help with the communication as well as the council in getting these messages or wants or desires in the future to committees. Rather than, you know, when you think of the UPD board, what it's designed to do is, you know, if you do have one city or one entity that really has some very odd ideas, you know, the bigger picture can probably help with that. Or this, you know, for instance, if we had one of our partners decide they wanted to defund, and I hate even using that term. I don't think there's anyone here that I hopefully agrees. We actually need well-trained police officers, but you know, it kind of not necessarily a group think, but a proper chain of subcommittee, or you know, where an idea can be brought forth and have multiple inputs to, you know, and even if it doesn't come to fruition up through the UPD board, at least you're hearing what they're saying, and you've got many minds looking at that process. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Based on Councilman Gettle's questions, it jogged something I probably should have asked earlier, but can someone from UPD answer the question of, are you seeking to bring other members in, or do you have any thoughts about trying to bring in other communities to UPD?
I've brought that point up to Chief Maz and the sheriff before. I think probably right now with the current times and you know, we look to the opportunity to make ourselves more.
So at least we can see the need for more technology.
Amen to that.
Can you hear me okay?
Mostly.
I think with,
In answer to Matt's question, one of our goals, and is we've had our 3-year plan, is to get our house in order. And then if other people want to join it, you know, to look at that. And we may even look at some other ways of creating a model that incentivizes people to join, because when people say we like the UPD model, you know, they like the shared services piece, because that's what's difficult for departments to do, is those shared services are always a constant challenge. So, you know, we should leverage that as one of the great advantages we have, but we're gonna get our house in order first and make sure that we're stable and moving forward.
Can you elaborate just a little bit more on that 3-year plan? Like,
So,
what
yeah,
are the key components on it?
The key components on that are first and foremost the budget. So there's all sorts of things that when this current administration came in, that we wanted to change and evolve. One of the primary things is the budget, because every road and everything is touched by that budget. It all crosses through the budget. So we wanted to make that the primary project. As you know, our budget works on a 3-year average. So to get things cleaned up and to make it very transparent, and so that there was extreme accountability for every single dollar that you spend. We had to do that over a 3-year average. So with the budget, the first year was a very heavy lift. The second year, we've been refining it. And the third year is just going to be some small tweaks and making it a document that's got a lot of information, that's easy to understand. I always tell our CFO, make sure it's something that I can understand, because then everybody will understand it. And so we're always trying to, make it something that's a solid product. So a lot of it's around the budget, some restructuring that we've done in the shared services, or even further looking at some consolidations and some other ways that we can make that even more efficient and cost effective, especially in any of those shared services that support our officers. It's really what shared services is about, is it not only helps your community, but it supports the officers in their primary mission, especially in the patrol piece. Because remember, your shared services is like radios and computers and training and all those things. There's a lot of demand right now for good training for our officers. So VEC is another one. We've been working on partnering with VEC to get those costs where they need to be. And so that's kind of just some examples of how we see it as a 3-year project.
Maz and Randy, what was 2017? Why is it so large in its impact?
I'll let Chief Maz speak to that. He was actually here in my seat at the time, but I believe it had to do with the shelter and the ramp up of those that staying there. Go ahead, Maz.
That's exactly what it was. It was the shelter, and then it was a combination. You recall Operation Rio Grande and Operation Diversion, and some of those events were occurring at the same time, and it really pushed that population all across Salt Lake County, and a lot of it, came to Midvale, and it was realized, and I'd had some discussions with Kane Loader and others that, we wanted to make sure we were documenting the impact that was happening to Midvale. And so that increased our reporting, which on one hand, didn't help with the model, but or with the formula, but on the other hand, I think it may have helped get us a little more funding for the shelter out there.
That's exactly right, Chief. That was the whole premise. We had to track very closely the impact. State legislature wanted to know what was the impact on Midvale of the homeless situation here. And so we wanted to give them as accurate numbers that we could to show them that it was an impact on Midvale. And I think our officers they were a little overzealous, but created a lot of case numbers during that period of time with the homeless population.
So my next question is, when does that rotate out then?
This next year.
And what has been the impact of 2017 in 2020? What's still here, if anything, in 2020 that 2017 caused?
Well, we've got the, with the DWS grant, we've got the 6 shelter workers, as well as the 3 that are covering, were initially pulled out of our patrol bids covering. So that's been big. And we almost anticipated our cases would jump up, but inversely we saw with compliance and, going out and really covering all the districts, not just around the shelter, but throughout the city, and in essence becoming a model for dealing with those experiencing homelessness. our cases did not rise, and we, even refer them or defer them to perhaps mental health or, jail isn't the solution. So it's been good.
I noticed in Matt's statistics, I don't know if you can pull that up there quickly, Matt, on the caseload over 2012 to 2020.
Are you looking for the caseload or the shared services costs?
You had one of your charts showed a big hump in 2017 down.
Let's see if I can,
I believe it was a graph.
is that the one, Mayor?
No, maybe it was the one just before it. No,
That one has to do with fund balance. This is the one that talks about shared services and where I talked about the impact of the cases on and how that impacted how much we've had to pay in shared services.
okay.
This shows a similar set of information.
So there's 2017 was a watershed year for increasing our UPD then, was it not?
With that anomaly, it being that 3-year average, it'll take, even if you have a very large year, it will ramp up and then level out and come back down. So over that 3-year, it's, to my understanding, and we question that when we kind of look back as to why those were ramping up, what was the cause and effect? And it was the 2017, but so it was designed so if unintendedly, and to give an example, what city experienced here recently with their downtown area, unexpectedly, you could have a significant impact to cases or impact your city, but it would be realized over a 3-year period versus a spike in a 1 year. If that makes sense, Mayor.
It
I
does.
believe that might have something to do with this.
Yep. Thank you.
Paul, you're on mute.
I'd like to ask the question, as the other cities pulled out, they didn't want to release or do away with any police officers or any positions. And they weren't able to cut what needed to be cut immediately. Is that going to be the same going forward now, or are we really going to bring us to where we need to be?
Chief Mazurn and Lisa have been deeply involved in that with the exercise where they have that 4.2, and I can assure you it does create rifts. It's going to be downsizing, right sizing the regional services. I did hear in one conversation there was concern that it may again include precinct, and I've been assured it does not, and I've made it well known that it cannot in Midvale, but we've done our part, with our adjustments precinct wide, but regional is where it's got to come from to be completely neutral. I also asked Lisa Dudley to run a model, and I believe I shared it with Kane and the mayor and perhaps Matt, where they reduced that 4.2 out of regional and then reapply it to the regional services model. Because it's based on the property tax, the population, the caseload, and it actually was pretty consistent. I also asked them to take out the 2017 anomaly, so in essence, where we'd be next year, but they use current cases, so our last full year of cases without the 2017 load, and it put us at about, if it was current adopted, it was about a 1.5% increase for this year. Obviously, if we were sitting there, I would have never asked to reduce by one FTE with that sergeant position. But just so, we could see truly if Midvale or Taylorsville was not in that, and we plug that formula back in without those 4.2. So yes, it will include RIFs. It will include downsizing of bodies, not just operational costs of regional services.
I mean, I think that's part of what happened when they left, is we weren't willing to do those RIFs. And obviously we don't want to fire anybody, but the reality comes that we have to make the organization fit what's existing. I think that's one of the biggest concerns that I've had is, are you willing to be able to do that?
Yeah, I agree. And I heard those concerns last year, and Taylorsville, Midvale, and Mill Creek are huge users of the regional services. So that component, I mean, a 4.2, that's a big cut, and you can't do that just strictly by operational. So I haven't been a part of the exercises. I've seen bottom lines of it. If Chief Maz is still on the line, he could confirm. In fact, it looks like he's off mute, so I'll shut my mouth now and let him elaborate on some of those models they ran through.
To your point, Councilman Glover, we made cuts with Harriman. We made cuts with Riverton. We made even some additional cuts in the budget this year. The organization is extremely lean. And, to show how serious we are, in the past few months, we're not doing any hiring. We're not doing any promotions. We're freezing everything in place to see what happens. And then we're going to move forward fairly aggressively with a lot of those difficult cuts. And of course, in this time right now, we want to do everything we can to preserve jobs and hope that everybody has employment. But we're going to have to make some tough decisions, and we recognize that. And we're going to have to restructure the shared services so that we can try to have it maintain its efficacy without completely destroying it, because that's the power of being a UPD and sharing services. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Well, I appreciate that you're at least willing to do that. And I mean, I understand not wanting to do those things, but we have to do whatever it is to make the organization work. I think part of the problem too is, and I would hope as they go forward, that the idea of leaving is okay, but this organization should be so good that we don't want to leave. I mean, that's really got to be the goal. You've got to make it so that it is an organization that everybody wants to belong to, not to leave. And the only way to do that is to address the underlying concerns each city has. And I know you can't meet all of them, but the bottom line is, until we really understand that Midvale should not want to even think about leaving. There should be such a good program going that it's not even a question.
Good point. I appreciate that input. It's interesting because it seems like all the partners, every partner has something that's important to them. But I'm hoping that as we can add more to the conversation, because we talk a lot about governance and costs and things like that. And those are all incredibly important issues. But I think sometimes we forget to conduct an audit or an evaluation, or look hard at issues like effectiveness of policing and are our communities getting served at the highest level? Are we clearing cases, or just inactivating everything that comes through when there's a big emergency? Are we capable of doing that, not only just at the moment but in a sustained way? And there's a lot of these operation issues that center around value, and I appreciate how Matt has touched on that a number of times. That's a really important factor, and I think in this decision, and sometimes we get caught up in some of the other things that and we forget there's this operations piece that's really important, and that's where UPD is at its strongest. But sometimes we don't look at that because we're thinking about other things. So, something for your consideration.
I guess the other thing that I would like to say is, a historical perspective from this is the reason that we went into UPD to start with is because our budget was out of control and we couldn't afford to keep our own police. So you need to understand, at least our council needs to understand that just because we have our own police doesn't mean that we're going to stay within our budget. We joined UPD because we were going to be able to save money and be able to keep our budget without raising taxes. So that one perspective needs to be looked at least, to know that we're not necessarily going to save money if we leave.
Well, the numbers that we went over tonight indicate that already. It goes anywhere from some savings to no savings at all, and in fact, quite a bit more.
Well, and also you have to understand every year I was on the council when we had our own police, they kept telling us we had to have more police, more police, more police. We have to have more people out there. That was one of the things that always happened every year, didn't it, Cade?
That's correct, every year.
They said we're growing and we have to have more police.
Well, and they were going, we had a lot of calls for officers. There's no doubt about that, with no help. When things really got tough, I asked a couple of our officers, well, how did you do that? How did you guys survive? And they said it was the work ethic that Midvale had, working together and all hands on deck whenever there was a problem. The luxury that you have with UPD is they have the resources all around the valley that they can pull in instantly to help with a situation or a problem. And, that's something that we didn't have as the Midvale City Police Department.
To be clear, we need more from all the departments, especially, the fact that we're going to add a couple thousand new units over in, the Sharon Steel area. We're going to need new plows. We need a new fire department building that can handle that. So the idea of needing more shouldn't be a surprise to anyone when we're trying to grow our city and population size. So to me, if someone came to me after we added 2,000 units that are going into an area and said we need more police officers to handle that, or more snow plows, or more fire, that seems very natural for growth. So if we stay with UPD or leave UPD, we're gonna need more. That's unless we never change our city size and say we are at the 35,000 or whatever, and no more are allowed in. Let's build a wall and keep everyone out. That's just natural with the type of growth we're trying to push.
And I agree with that. I'm just hoping, I guess the big concern again, is on the budget, is that if UPD can maintain a reasonable rate of increase each year and not get into this double interest or raise every year.
I appreciate the comments, the public comments. From my perspective, and we haven't talked about it, and I do read the Facebook and social media pages. One thing I see that some folks are really missing is the old Midvale Police Department where they knew their officers. And I will tell you, that's where I look at perhaps we can try to improve that. But per Councilman Brown's comments, just within a couple hundred yards of my station, there are several high density, it's coming, and it's coming fast. And I'm not worried now because they're well kept, and we've leveraged, for instance, a good landlord program, Parkview. I've asked your staff to give me contact on that. With or without the good landlord program, I want to get a hold of the manager and provide them what's going on, so we can leverage good management within these high density housing which alleviates my opportunity to go over there and, deal with criminals. A lot of the time, they do some pretty good self-regulation. So, but it's coming, and if we can delay it, keep these properties maintained well, I'm seeing a lot better results. And I have to attribute that to the Good Landlord Program. But per Councilman Brown's comments, it's coming, and if we can delay it and leverage it, absolutely.
Yeah, and that wasn't like a negative towards anything in particular. I just know if we had 5,000 or 7,000 citizens and hundreds of thousands of square feet of office, that could have, issues. It's just a natural part of growth.
Yep. As well as the commercial in and out too. For instance, since they've been closed down and working from home, we've seen, well, it's probably with timing of the 7200 South corridor, as bad as that is, I can imagine if they were coming to work and using that funnel right there. Good time to put orange cones up now. So agreed with you, Councilman.
Thanks.
Matt, this is Quinn. I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
One, as we talk about the potential costs and going out and getting funding for any startup costs, look at what's the impact on our ability to go out and bond if we need to make other improvements. Like if we have to put in a parking garage somewhere, or if we need to, well, for whatever reason, we need to have that money to do something else. We look at that.
I have not looked at that. Laura, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Midvale City has a great rating and, a reasonable amount of debt capacity. If we were to use, the tools that we would have available to us would be to pledge sales tax, franchise fees, or to do what's called a building authority bond, where we would pledge the actual, physical asset of what you're constructing. So, I wouldn't view the issuance of these tax anticipation notes as effectively sucking that down much, if at all, because again, what creates it is this timing mismatch of when you have to leave and when you can put property tax increases in place, and you're already paying most of that expense now is built into your property tax rates. It's not like a new expense that you are getting. So it's already built in your budget. It's just that we have to do this financing. So what you are incurring in additional costs is effectively the interest expense, which is meaningful, but for a city of your size with your budget, it's not going to hurt your ability to do other things that you might want to do.
Okay, thank you. And then you said another thing that was included in the feasibility study in that model was that we would be paying the officers more. Do we have an estimate on what percentage more that would be and how competitive that is to other departments?
So it is a sizable, relatively speaking, as percentage wise, it's a sizable increase, but it would put us in the middle of the market. We wouldn't be in the top several departments in the community. I can get that number on what that exact percentage difference is. I don't have that at my fingertips right offhand.
No, that's good enough. I mean, one of my concerns is if we're a smaller department, then there's going to be less opportunity for upward advancement. And even if we're in the middle of the pay scale and people don't see that there's opportunity to be promoted, I just get worried they're going to get trained here by us and then leave to a different department where they can, whether or not they get paid more, but they can advance up. And, I mean, they're probably not going to move for lesser pay if we're in the middle, so they can move somewhere, get paid a little bit more, and have upward potential. So that's a concern where with UPD, it's a bigger organization, so there's more opportunities to advance. And I know you want to make a comment, but I'll just, agree with Councilmember Glover. I think UPD should be the model that other people want to join, rather than having discussions about cities wanting to leave. I mean, I would love to see it grow. I would love to have almost just a whole county, police department that people can draw on those resources when something's needed. So, all right, go ahead, Matt. I know you wanted to make a comment.
All I was going to say is that one of the reasons that we're doing these preliminary findings in advance of doing the final report is that there are potentially some opportunities for us to do some additional research. And, we could, for example, say if we wanted to be in the top, look at what it would mean if we were going to be in the top 3 as far as funding and, what the implications of that would be. We also could have the ability of, I was trying to channel Councilman Glover in this report and trying to be as conservative as possible in our budget assumptions, so that we wouldn't have any oopses in the future. That's a technical term. And then, but we could also look at maybe providing the optimistic assumptions as well as far as the costs. I mean, again, I prefer the conservative view of things so that we don't mislead anyone and cause mistakes in the future. But those are some things that we could potentially look at for a final version of the study if those things would be useful.
I think we absolutely have to look at the higher amount of pay where we would have a smaller scale police department. We wouldn't have the opportunity for advancement. So I think we would be forced to have the higher pay scale.
I'd like to kind of chime in on that myself. With a smaller department, Maz, you or Randy, do you anticipate that we would have more senior or more junior people to start with, which would then define where the pay scale is going to go in the next 5 to 10 years?
Mayor, that's a tough one to say. I do know the pay will draw people for sure. That's what's hurt us as every individual department across this valley is we're stealing from each other. I know Maz has referred to, and we kind of laughingly refer to gypsy cops, as they follow the dollar and they try to increase their standing financially. In essence, we've created a pay war for officers, and that's what's driving this. Good leadership, good pay will draw good officers. If you're not paying so well, you may not get the qualification, the experience. That truly, if you start your own standalone police department, you're going to have some experience. You cannot have a completely inexperienced staff. I know of other agencies, and I will not use their name, but you look at where they're at experience-wise in their patrol officers, and that, in essence, can create quite a liability, and how to react. And we're seeing this on YouTube every day. Officers, experienced or not, perhaps not reacting as they should. Go ahead, Matt.
I just basically agree with you. That's been one of the greatest challenges in policing, not just here locally, but nationally, with what we refer to as the wage wars that have been occurring, because recruitment has gone down. Everybody's fighting for the same resources. And so that has forced these pay wars to occur, and people seem to move around. It's hard to predict, Mayor, what would happen. But it would depend on that pay issue. And if it wasn't very competitive, you would get younger officers, because a lot of time when you're starting out, you're just looking for that first opportunity to gain some experience. And then as you go, and as you become more experienced and as you grow and you get married, our policemen and women start families or have other priorities happen, they start to change what's important to them. And a lot of times those pay and benefits become very important when they start to hit that 8, 9, 10-year mark. Then that's where all of a sudden you lose this really good officer if you can't be competitive. And so you've got to have, in that higher pay, you've got to have other incentives that keep people there. And you've already referred to some of those words, you know, opportunities, promotions, experiences, career diversity, if different kinds of career growth. So that's very much a reality.
Thank you. All right, are we nearing the end of this discussion, or anybody have any further questions?
Any further direction on anything that we should do to finalize the study besides looking at higher salary? Thank you.
Matt, I do just have one more question. Maybe you or Kane can answer. We've often been very cognizant of the time frame. You know, that's why we're having this meeting tonight, because we need to make a decision today. But we don't really. We could, if we could decide 3 weeks from now to issue the 12-month letter of intent, if what Taylorsville pulling out is found to have some catastrophic effect on UPD, we're not stuck with it for another entire fiscal year. It would just mess up our fiscal year. You know, normally we have our budget and it's great because we know what's going to end on 6/30/2021. But it would just mean we would have to do some different things with our numbers for the next budget cycle.
A couple of things.
The only requirement is that you have to give a year's notice. Now, when that year begins, totally up to you. It doesn't have to be July 1. It can be September 1. It can be October 15th. So, yeah, it's totally up to you when you want to issue that notice.
Okay. I just wanted that to be clear to anyone who thinks that if we don't issue a letter, then we're stuck until this time, 2021, and we're not.
Just a couple other things to add to that too is that we have had indications from UPD that there would be a willingness to let us not have to do the full, if we take another 3 weeks to finalize things, that they would let us still use a July 1 date without a negative impact. And if anyone at UPD can correct me if I'm wrong in that, but that's one element of this.
The board has given us till the end, not officially, but that they were leaning towards giving us till the end of July to still make the decision and count it as July 1.
The only other thing to add to that too, though, is that if we do that, then we're essentially giving ourselves 11 months to get everything put together too. So that, I mean, that's one consideration, but you know, there's both the fact that it would allow us to still use the July 1 date, but we would have 11 months to then create our own department if that was the direction we were going to go. And then the other thing is just a reminder too, is that while we definitely don't want to you should, and I don't think you are, make your decision lightly, but there is still the ability that if we do provide notice, that we could withdraw that as well, just as sort of part of your thinking on where you want to proceed. So we could set it from 12 months from when you guys want to, if you wanted to pull the trigger on issuing the withdrawal. We have this 3-4 week window that UPD has provided us if we want to do 11 months instead of 12 months. And then also is the issue of there are different things that can happen after the letter is issued. I hope that made sense.
Also, I would like to see UPD give us a really what it's going to look like without Taylorsville in there, what they're going to do, and give us specifics of how they're going to make this work.
I
agree.
Because that won't happen until July 1 of 2021. So that's, what
Well,
is
they ought to be,
right
they ought to
is
be,
a year
they ought to
away.
be able to come up with some plans of what they expect they're gonna do.
Yeah, I would think a CFO of the organization could start projecting out, with that before they lose, with what Councilman Glover was saying. If they have to wait until 2021, you're effectively saying they can't forecast, Mayor. And I don't think that's accurate.
No, I'm not saying they can't forecast. I'm just saying it's pretty ragged to look 15 months ahead or 18 or 21 months ahead at this point. That's all.
Well, I would like to see their best projections of what they think is gonna happen.
We have some preliminary numbers that have been furnished to us that shows the scenario with Taylorsville pulling out and what that does. Chief Maz or Thomas, you want to talk to that?
Yeah, we've already done that exercise and gone through that list. We haven't necessarily published it out there because I wanted to take a secondary look at it with the commanders over each of those areas and have them look at it and say, put a second set of eyes on it and say, look at this. Can we make this work? Do you have a better suggestion? Is there something that you would change? But here's the number we got to get to and how are we going to get there? And so, in a very short span of time, we've already basically essentially have a model to start working from. But I think it would be good management to go through that entire list and share with all the people that actually manage those areas, because often the best ideas come from them. So that would be the next step, which would probably start next week. So to your point, Councilman Glover, we could show you some specifics and give you a better idea of what that shared services would look like.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm asking. It's just, I want to, if I'm going to look at this and vote one way or another, I want to be able to say, hey, this is what they think is going to happen. I know you can't predict out year and a half, but you got to come up with some plan to be able to make this work.
Correct. And I'm also trying to be sensitive too to, we're talking about people's jobs and their lives and their families. So we're trying to do this in a way that's controlled and smart, and making sure we're creating good information and making good decisions.
Okay,
Yeah, I was just going to say that, and just a little point of clarification that was brought up during the Matt's presentation is when you say a 20-year retirement, that's for our more senior officers. There's actually a 20 and a 25-year tier. What the 25 years, what they call the tier 2 URS. But when we make those potential cuts, I as a commander would really, I want to be involved. I know there was a proposed cut just that was a budgetary exercise kind of late in the game before we completely adopted this budget. And it included, I'll just give this as an example, getting rid of the crossing guard coordinator. And it sounds so, irrelevant to police operations, but can you imagine either one of my officers or one of your staff having to train, certify, and manage all the crossings in Midvale, with part-time crossing guards? That one personnel that does over 225 crossings, that's one, I think unanimously as precinct commanders, we would all absolutely think that's the best money spent on a shared service, just as a single example.
And I will add relative to the model that we're working to put together and update the final report. We have started to have conversations to address the Taylorsville, the potential Taylorsville impact. We were hoping to have numbers ready to share with you today, but they weren't perfected yet. So it is something we're trying to get our arms around too, in terms of our best rational estimate in that regard.
One other thing I wanted to add was, two things actually. Number one, during this whole process, we've had a list of things that we wanted accountability from UPD, and for the most part, they've provided those things to us as far as budgetary items go. So I feel we're in a position where, you know, you tell the kid if he eats his or her vegetables, you give him ice cream at the end. But we're reaching the end at this point, and we've told UPD all along, you know, we need this and this and this from you, and then we'll think about staying. And they've done those things, whether we like it or not, or whether we expected them to do it or not, they did. And to me, it seems like, you know, I wasn't here when the decision was made to enter UPD, but we did make that decision as a city. Mayor and Councilmember Glover, I think you both were around for that decision. And it seems that the worst, you know, these other cities keep, you know, saying that withdrawing from a pooled service is the worst way to strengthen a pooled service program. So, you know, it's death by 1,000 cuts. If, you know, you want to strengthen something, you don't leave it and hope that they can reorganize with what's left and make it even better. So, you know, those are the things that I've struggled with over the past few weeks. It's, you know, we've made some very public statements to UPD saying we want this and this and this. And the CFO has provided those things to us. Chief Thomas has provided those things to us. And, you know, to a lesser extent, because they're not involved in the day-to-day with us, Chief Mazarin and Sheriff Rivera have as well. So, you know, I think a lot of these other cities, Harriman and Riverton, you know, maybe weren't as invested in the model as some of the other cities were, because if they were, they wouldn't have left it to reorganize and try to be better with less. You know, that's the whole reason that we wanted to get into this. And Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the reason we wanted to get into this premier policing force in the state, was the pooled services. And if we continue to make decisions to leave a pooled system, obviously it's going to fail. You know, it's very similar to what opponents, whether you like the Affordable Care Act or not, you know, those who didn't like it tried to make it weaker so that it would just not benefit anyone. And I feel that that's what we're seeing here with the UPD model. Everyone agrees, apparently, that it's a very premier, prestigious policing organization, but then, you know, no one wants to stick around when things get tough. So,
well, that's my point. My point is that they need to make it so that we want to stay. Not, they need to address the issues that each city has and clear them the best they can.
yeah.
And if they're work to do that, then they're going to stay as a unified body. But if they ignore what we need, then they won't. We'll leave, and everybody else will leave if they can't do that. So the reality is, the policemen we love and the service we love, it's addressing the issues that come between all of the cities. They've got to learn to be able to address those as a unified top command and not ignore what our problems are.
I want to chime in on for a second here. We were supposed to give a pretty clear sort of ask at the last at one of the UPD meetings. This was an email dated from May 6th. I don't think it was projected in a way that represented the council, but we actually had 4 issues. And what's unfair to UPD a little bit is some of it has to be done through its board members. But our probably biggest issue is the governance, the fairness of current voting structure, and the sheriff not directly answering to the governing board. That hasn't been addressed. Officer pay was also mentioned, where we want to be, you know, a plan to, you know, 3 to 4 year plan to fix the market inequalities. There was some upside down feeling on you know, our officers versus our sergeants and so on. That I guess is in the works. We've had major concerns of the use of the fund balance. I know Matt touched on that, but it's still a concern on that. And the yearly growth of the UPD contract amounts, which has been lowered to the use of the fund balance. I think it would be a mischaracterization to say we said to UPD, these are the things we want, and then they fixed them and then we're leaving. I think it's pretty clear we have governance issues that, Chief Maz and Randy don't really control that. That's through, our the board that has to vote on that. But if we didn't represent that in our UPD board, which it sounded like we didn't, that's a major issue because the city council directly said these are our issues. And those were either not addressed or they're only sort of halfway addressed. So I don't quite agree with you on that one, Dustin.
Well, I think what you just mentioned is, part of the overall problem with just, Chief Thomas can say, yes, I hear you. I'll take these concerns back to the board, but the board can say, get out of here. We don't.
Right. And that's why it's an overall hard discussion because our chief lowered his costs. Right. So he did a good job at that. But if the board itself doesn't want to entertain, what we would consider, equal voting or towards our budgetary needs and things like that, then, I don't really know how we rectify with the UPD people on the phone. So it's a very hard and challenging discussion to have. And the idea is we talk about it here and we talk about with our police chief, and then our representative goes and has that conversation with the board. And if the board's not on board, that could be a reason to leave UPD, regardless of what our, chief and Maz and them do, because in fact, those governing issues could be more expensive and more serious than like a 7% raise in 1 year that UPD comes with, right? Because we can manage around that. But if there's something that comes through with the board where they say, if everything depreciates after 10 years and if you ever leave, you don't get your value, that's a lot more than a 7% increase. But that puts UPD in a bind because they're not the ones that are actually making that. It's the board members. And so I don't know. There's two bodies that we need working together, and I do feel like our chief has done a good job at his cost, but there's more to it than just that.
Well, I think too, and this is a discussion maybe for us to have in-house, but we have the ability to appoint someone to the UPD board who, might be a more vocal proponent of what we, the city council, have been asking for changes in the structural aspect of UPD. I'm saying, the stuff that we've asked the sheriff, chief, and the CFO, we've gotten that information and that transparency from them. The board is the board and the votes go where they go. That's, one disadvantage of a pooled system, I guess, that's set up the way that UPD is versus the way Unified Fire is set up. I would prefer the Unified Fire set up to the governing board of UPD.
So I guess I will agree to the extent that UPD has helped, when we need them to. But like I was saying, I don't necessarily think, bigger issues that I've come up with have been brought to our attention after, the financial ones where, we need to see those fixed because, a percentage increase raise can be something we work around one way or the other. But if we're locked in for 5 or 10 years or don't have, the support we need, that's a different issue.
Mm-hmm. And as far as the governing board, I mean, as the meetings that I've watched, there doesn't seem to be a lot of dissension. I mean, the debate is lively at times, but when the votes come to it, they're pretty much uniform. As far as budgetary issues, for sure, there seem to be, when you're talking like police tactics or body cameras, that sort of thing, then I've noticed that there are some dissenting votes on issues like that. But the everyday, daily governance of the board seems to all be on the same page. And I don't think we help that board by pulling out.
Right.
Now, you are aware that before the council, we will be having a resolution to approve the next interlocal agreement, which will give weighted voting to the cities in the any budgetary item. So that's been a victory that we outlined we wanted. Other cities have outlined that's what they wanted, and it's going to happen within the next 4 to 6 weeks when all the city councils approve that ILA.
I would like the city council to review that to make sure it's, you know, representative of what we're talking about here. Totally,
Excellent.
because I do feel,
Oh, sorry, Brian.
you know, or if you could speak to it, that would help too, Lisa.
Well, no, it's just that amendment was passed by the board. And that will be coming for ratification, probably at the next council meeting or the one after that. Next one. It's just a ratification of it, so you can see what the board just passed.
Do you have you reviewed that?
Yes.
Would it be a fair, is it a fair representation or is it still diluted?
Well, it's a weighted voting based on population and contribution to the budget. And it takes, it's diluted in the sense that it takes 60% of of something of the board to pass something on the budget or an item. And the percentages or the weight each entity has changes every year based on their contribution to the budget, member fee, and their population. So currently, I mean, just as by way of example, these numbers aren't, the numbers that are part of the amendment are not necessarily accurate. They change, they'll change with this budget year. But it has the city, if you take the cities, it would be 60.09% with the numbers that we have on the current amendment or the percentages. So if that changes, and it will change, I mean, once Taylorsville, you know, all of that impacts our weight, our percentage of the vote. Does that make sense? I'm not explaining it very well.
And on top of that, is it just budgetary things they're voting on, or is it everything for weighted?
No, just budget.
Okay, so it only, okay. So
And it takes two people to bring forth a weighted vote. Otherwise, it's just a regular vote. But two people on the board can call for a weighted vote. But then
But
it
you can,
takes 6% to pass.
you can almost argue that anything before them is a budgetary issue. Like even if you were to argue, should police officers have body cameras? That becomes a budgetary issue, correct?
Well, in terms of, are you going to provide the money for those body cameras? Yes, but a policy decision that would decide would, you know, should officers have, that wouldn't be a, or governance budget issue.
Sorry, I'm just shaking my head. Not knowing what to say to that, because I don't know. I mean, that doesn't sound unfair to have a weighted vote on the budget and then just have a one-to-one vote on policy issues. But I mean, obviously, if we were looking at ourselves and our interests only, we would say we'd want weighted voting for both. But, you know, I think that's a fair compromise at this point.
Realize to have a majority vote for that, to even have that put in the ILA. And so we've been walking on glass to this point. And if it proves to be a working model, perhaps it will expand to other issues as they arise. But to just jump into that headlong without having some success along the way, I've been foolhardy. We'd have lost, and then we'd have lost all the townships, and then at the very beginning, we would have lost and couldn't have gone any further.
What do you mean?
Well, the townships have one vote. They might have 600 people in their city, like Copperton.
Yep.
Midvale had one vote with 35,000.
Mhm.
And so we argued that budget is very much affected by population and contribution to UPD's budget. And so we were able to convince all but one on the UPD board that that was the right way to go. I mean, a weighted vote on budgetary items. And so we have to convince, I think there's 11 on the board right now. We have to convince 6 of them that it's the right way to go on any vote outside of budget. In budget, we can have the 4 cities control their budgets. And that's make sure the dog wags the tail, not the tail wags the dog. Now, most of the propositions that are brought up by UPD management are very sound, and they're well thought out, and they're tested. They're brought out to the Lisa Garners of all the cities so that they can test them out, get feedback, and make sure they're on solid ground before they ever come before the board, just like we do as a city. We just don't throw down item 1, item 2, item 3, and if you like it, or down if you don't, and change our policies. We think them out well. We check against current policies and laws within the state. We try to come up with something that's positive for our citizens. And that's the same thing UPD board, UPD management places before UPD board. They're not foolhardy. They're well thought out.
I would never say that it was foolhardy. I do think it's, but at the same time, there's a lot different interest between a city of 600 and a city of 35,000. So even a thought out, situation is, doesn't necessarily speak to everyone's needs. Mayor, do you remember when you voted on the weighted voting?
Yes.
Okay. Was it between our last meetings? I'm just trying to, I feel like I hadn't gotten the message on that because it would have been good to know going into this.
It was our meeting in May.
Okay.
Am I right on that, Lisa?
The June meeting.
What's
Okay,
that?
that's the one I hadn't watched yet. Okay, that makes
So
sense.
it actually just, it passed in this meeting. It was discussed in May. It passed June 18th, I think, in that meeting.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks, Maz. It was a
Hey,
June
Mayor,
meeting.
Mayor, can I just throw one more thing out related to the governance?
Yeah. The
Uh,
governance was discussed. I don't think we've gone very far on that one yet, but on the budget items, we did.
So to let you know, the sheriff sent me a text while we're sitting in this meeting and wanted me to let everyone know on the council, they're currently doing an analysis on what would happen if the sheriff stepped away from that CEO role, the UPD. So that is a project that's being worked on.
So they're hearing us.
And Mayor, can you comment on something else that we've heard? Well, one, I appreciate the UPD board and the sheriff is listening to these concerns. Can you comment on the thing that we've heard about where they may look at another change to the interlocal agreement to make it harder for a city or a township or even the county to withdraw? And if they do so, the financial impact in doing so will be more severe in the future? Is that just a discussion, or are they actually looking at an amendment?
I've heard nothing or seen nothing as far as a proposal. There's obvious feelings of stability in UPD, and that was brought up in one board meeting, and it might have been our June meeting, that had thoughts brought up that stability in UPD could be minimized if there was a commitment to 5 years retention before you could leave. And obviously that would be true, but it's counterproductive for cities to be held to that level, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. That's concerning to me if they try to move that way. And I mean, I almost feel if the decision is to not issue any notice today and that the UPD board starts to discuss that, I almost feel like we would have to revisit the discussion just because of that long-term impact. I would hope that they follow something like Councilmember Glover, where they're saying, if we make these changes and we become an organization people want to flock to, that creates the stability. And that's how we have the stability, is members wanting to join rather than basically locking them in.
You're absolutely right. And if we are to invite other cities to come in that would prefer the UPD model, and then say, oh, by the way, you've got to be a member for 5 years, I think they'll just brush their hands and say, no, thanks. We'll do it on our own until you change that condition. So I totally agree with you. Okay, any other questions on the discussion? Do we want more information from Laura or Kate?
Just give us the bottom line when it's over with.
Keep working with Matt and your staff to get there.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, work in progress on that.
Good. Well, it's good to have this so that we really know what we're getting into one way or another. I mean, you can't make an intelligent decision with all the information.
And that stated, Councilman Glover, we will, in the final analysis, we're not going to be able to, predict with, perfection what the costs are going to be. We're going to give you a range, as Matt has indicated, sort of a, maybe the best case or the worst of the best case and the worst of the worst cases. I like how he stated that. So there will be a range, and you'll be left with a tough decision.
Well, I've always learned that you go with the worst of the worst. It could happen, so you've got to plan on that and hope and then you hope for the best.
There you go. That's the right approach.
Any further questions for Matt?
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on then. We'll take an action item here to consideration of resolution number 2020 R27, authorizing the mayor to sign and issue Midvale City's notice of intent to withdraw from Unified Police Department. Kane, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I guess I will. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Matt and Kyle and others, Laura and her group, for the work that they've done on such a short time frame to put this all together and to get as far as we have with this feasibility study. What you have before you tonight, one thing I would point out is this process actually started as the news media has been talking to us and interviewing us Everybody has asked, well, did this just start here a couple of months ago? The answer is no. This process started over a year ago when the city council started asking the staff to start working on a feasibility study or looking at the cost of starting our own police department, just so that they had, if nothing else, comparison. And so this process started. We kind of put it off for a while, thinking that we could get some things fixed with the UPD command staff and management to get things in order, and that didn't happen the way we wanted it to, and so we ended up back this spring, kind of the same place we were last year. In my mind, what this boils down to, you know, I mean, we could talk back and forth what the costs are, dollars and cents. It's, you know, what really makes sense for Midvale City. The governance part of the organization is a key issue, in the fact this is not the same organization that we joined in 2011. In 2011, when I sat down with Sheriff Winder in 2010, actually started discussions with him on joining the newly created UPD. I was intrigued by the fact that he was creating a municipal police force. And he was excited in the fact that many cities were interested in being involved in it. And, you know, one thing I will tell you, there's a difference in police services. Just as there's a difference between what the county sheriff provides and the Utah Highway Patrol provides, it's different policing. And it's different policing between the county sheriff's department and the city. It's just different. And what intrigued me about UPD was the fact that they were creating a municipal police department in Service City. When we joined UPD, the cities were in control of UPD. We really were steering the ship there. And when things got convoluted, when the townships were created by the county and the equal voting was given to the township, that's when things kind of went haywire in my mind in the governance. And, you know, I think the board's trying to do some things to rectify that by going to weighted voting. But the problem is it's not the same organization. I would like to see UPD get back to its original vision of providing municipal police services the way it was started in the first place. And I think if they did that, they would attract more cities. Now, that's just me speaking in my observation. I got you into this mess back in 2011. I'm sorry that I couldn't give you a more clear-cut answer today. And I think Matt and Laura and the group have tried to do the best job they can. Back in 2011, it was very clear-cut. We were saving $800,000 to fill our budget hole. The biggest issue for me back in 2011 was making sure every police officer had a job. And that's the one condition that I gave the sheriff. I said, if we're coming and we're going to join UPD, I better have a job for every one of my people. And he called me 2 days later and said, I'll take every person you got. That was the big decision back then. You guys have much harder decisions right now than you had back in 2011. So what you have before you tonight is a resolution approving the mayor to sign and issue a letter of notice of intent to withdraw from the Unified Police Department. We prepared that for you. It's completely your decision. And based on what you've heard tonight, you have the option of approving this resolution, disapproving the resolution, or tabling it to a later date. And I will leave that to you or answer any further questions you might have.
Kane, just one question. When Sheriff Winter let us in, he said that we would get back everything that we put into the system, and all our cars were paid for. everything was taken care of that way, and he promised that. Has that been addressed with the board at all?
No, it hasn't. I imagine that will be part of the negotiation if you choose to issue the letter. One of the hard parts for us in trying to figure out what that means by leaving UPD and what we would get, what we would have to pay. We can't even begin any negotiations until you issue the letter. So we won't know any of that until we sit down and start negotiating on our departure. But you're right. We have an inventory of every bullet, everything that we had, every vest, every car, every gun that we turned over. We turned over fund balance for our fleet. We turned over fund balance for our vacation, for our officers. All that went to UPD.
And having said that, those cars were completely paid for. We were not leasing those cars.
No, they were recapitalized. We had those on a 5-year replacement cycle.
Well, my opinion is we need to table this at this time so that we can finish our the reports and find out exactly where we're at and find out what UPD their plans are going forward if we stay, so that we have more information to make a.
I respect that, but I think that we need to vote yes or no. I think we have a range of numbers, and I think that we can and should make a decision based on that, knowing that, again, if something comes back that's, just way out there that no one considered, we can undo whatever we've done. But I think there's more than enough information to make an informed decision here tonight, at least for me anyway.
I have to agree with Councilmember Gettle. I think we have enough information to make a decision tonight.
Whichever way that goes is very much up in the air. I wouldn't purport to know how anyone else is going to vote, but Paul, I don't know what information could we get back in a couple of weeks that would change your mind one way or another.
Well, I want to see what those plans are for UPD as Taylorsville's leaves. I want to see the numbers and what they're planning on cutting. Those type of things will be very important to me, whether we stay or leave.
And I think if we vote to stay, they'll obviously get that information to us. If we vote to leave tonight, it might not be that important to them to get that information to us anymore.
That'll be important to them because they're going to have to figure out if we're leaving. But my point is, as we are kind of in the driver's seat to be able to, for them to start looking at all of these other things that we want and see how they can proceed with the board. If we say we're leaving or we're not leaving, then we have no real leverage to get the other things done that we really think are important with the board. And we have that opportunity right now to be able to put pressure to get the board to help us, because we've got to be an important part of the organization, and they really want us to stay, and I can understand that. But if they want us to stay, they need to address some of the other problems that Councilman Brown has told us tonight and see if we can resolve these. And if they can, great. If they can't, we still have the opportunity to issue that letter. And they're giving us another month, so it doesn't make one bit of difference whether we do it tonight or we do it a month from now. But it gives us the opportunity to see if they can leverage some of the things that we need done, and hopefully the board can address those. We have nothing to lose to put it off. and everything to gain.
I think you make that motion then and see.
I'm willing to make the motion that we hold this until a later date, after we get more information.
Second. You're on mute, Mayor.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Do we want to have more comments and questions on the motion?
Maybe just to clarify, if this motion does pass, like exactly what information we're looking for to receive in order to make a decision.
Well, I'd like to see what UPD is going to do with their, if we stay and Taylorsville leaves, how they're going to make this work. I would like the board to be able to address the other issues that we've talked about, the governance, and see if they're willing to come up and talk about those things and help us so that we can get those things that are needed.
Mayor, when is the next board meeting?
Let me, you're talking about UPD board?
Yes, please.
I believe it's the 16th.
Of July. Yes, 16th of July, 9 o'clock in the morning.
Now, I personally don't think we need to rush this. I mean, we need to get the things that we need if we're going to stay with UPD. And if we can't get those things, then obviously we can leave.
I think it's a catch-22. If we vote to leave tonight, then we're done with it. We start with our new plan. If we vote to stay tonight, then we stay and we work on the issues as a member city of the UPD.
Any further discussion, questions?
I'll just comment on that. I don't think it's an either or on that, Dustin. I think even if the vote is to issue the notice of withdrawal, I think we can still work with them to see if they'll address our issues. I mean, you're probably working on that simultaneously with issues of how we set up our own. But then if they do address the concerns that we have, we can still stay. I think if we're really going to be focusing on that, I think it's better to table. But again, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. You know, saying if we take a vote tonight that we're committing to the one direction or the other.
I agree with Quinn on that. There was a someone made a motion in a second. Should we vote on it?
If there's no further discussion, Rory, would you call the questions, please?
Yes, Councilmember Sperry.
So this is, just to clarify, this is to table the motion or table the vote on this, right?
Uh-huh.
That's
Over to
right.
Aye.
Councilmember Glover.
Aye.
Robinson.
No.
Brown.
No.
And Gettle.
No.
That motion fails.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. I move that we consider resolution number 2020-R-27, authorizing the mayor to sign and issue Midvale City notice of intent to withdraw from Unified Police Department.
We have a motion. I don't hear a second. No second. That motion fails on failure of a second.
I'm unsure why we voted no on that first then.
Well, we're open to more motions.
Well, the first one was a motion to table and it was motioned and seconded, so we had to vote on it.
Yeah.
But any motion from the floor has to have a second.
Well, I understand the procedure part of it. So now what is we could have voted on this and then people could have voted no to not consider it. So now we're not waiting. Now we're not voting on this. So we're not doing anything, is what we effectively just did.
I mean, it means that 4 council members are unwilling to issue
Right.
the letter.
They could have voted no. You could second and still vote no.
I
You
mean,
can't make the motion. You
If
can't make the
someone
motion.
seconded the motion, then you go to the vote, and if the motion fails, then we're done.
Yeah. So instead, now we're in limbo. We've just done all this work.
well, no, it fails. It's as if it's a no vote.
Right.
But I mean, if someone else wants to second it, then we can vote on it, but no one was willing to do that.
So
All right.
does this mean we proceed with the reports and get a final or next whenever they come out? And then reconsider whatever we're gonna do?
I believe that's already in progress. Yes.
That's your direction, that's what we'll do.
So we're literally doing what the first motion failed to do. I just want to point that out. I don't even care if we would have voted no on that second one. But
Brian, do you want me to second the motion?
No, not now, because I just want to be clear that that's what we're doing. If everyone's okay.
If it's okay, I'll second Brian's motion.
And we can even all vote no, but if not, we're got to go with the first motion. Whether we say it or not, that's what we have to do, right? Because that's what Paul Glover is saying right now, that he wants to get more information, we'll revisit it, which is what that first vote was for, right? Councilman Glover?
That's correct.
Right, and so if we're going to go down that path, do we make a motion on that again and go with it? That's better than voting this, everyone voting no, and then giving them direction on something we just said we don't want doing.
I would like to reconsider and second Councilmember Brown's motion. And I would like to call the question.
Okay.
I still think this will fail and we'll go back to that first resolution, but okay. Maybe not.
All right. Restate your motion, Brian. So everybody's clear on what we're voting on.
Well, if everybody is okay with waiting, then I'm fine moving with tabling, if that's what it takes. But what I don't want to do is just nothing. So do you see what I'm saying, Councilman Gettle?
I do, yeah, and that's why I seconded your motion.
Yeah. Okay.
So that we can vote on it.
I think you
I
need
think if this
to
fails, we
your
should go back to the first one. Sure. I move that we adopt resolution number 2020-R-27, authorizing the mayor to sign and issue a Midvale City notice of intent to withdraw from Unified Police Department.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Now, any questions, comments on the motion? Hearing none. Rory?
Councilmember Sperry,
Nay.
Glover,
Nay.
Robinson,
No.
Brown,
No. Or yes, I made the motion. Fine, yes. I just want to get to the point where I want to get to the point where we just go back to what Glover wanted, was what I was getting at.
Gettle,
No.
All right, that motion fails.
Shall I put the, do you want to have the motion to table it again or not?
Well, it's been defeated now, so we can't table it.
But we're going to give the city that direction now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're still giving the direction to the staff to continue forward. And after we get all that information, we can always revisit it.
Yeah, I mean, that's clear. We can revisit any item at any time ever if more information comes in, but.
Right, but we need to give the staff that direction. Otherwise, they're going to say, why are they even putting the time and effort for it?
Right. Something we just voted no on. That's where I'm unsure how that works, but. So I guess if the staff can do what we just said no to, and then we'll revisit it, I guess.
Yep.
Well, we have a study that hasn't been completed yet. So I mean, we're.
Right, so we could have went with Glover's if that's how you feel.
I mean, that's my point
Yeah.
is we still have a study. We haven't got the final. We need that information from UPD and from our own study to really make an informed decision.
Well, what
I
was
mean,
the point?
I'm willing to vote on the motion, but I don't want to vote until I have all the information. That's all I'm saying.
What was the point of having a special unscheduled city council meeting?
To be able to discuss this. I mean, bottom line is, if we had enough information and we really wanted to do whatever, we could have done it. We didn't.
But if we knew we didn't have enough information, then we didn't have to have a special city. This could have just been our next city council meeting.
But we also didn't know how everybody felt.
Yeah, but I think we're actually putting UPD in a worse spot with at least not vote. We should have voted yes on Glover's, I guess, because now we're just sort of like, well, we'll maybe revisit if we get more information. Maybe we'll come back, which I don't necessarily think is fair to anyone, but that's my opinion, to just continually act like we're, if we get more, we're going to leave. And I don't even think that's fair to anyone on UPD, the member cities or the police force. But, I think we look a little silly with this.
Well, I mean, we can look silly if we want to, or we can say 4 of us voted no to issue the letter of intent to withdraw. So that's the decision of the council, and that
but now we're giving them direction to keep going, is what I mean.
Well, I mean, have 3 of us on council given that direction. I mean, I feel that, what you guys are saying requires an additional motion. We had an action item on the agenda that said, do you want to issue a letter or not?
So anyone from the prevailing side on the first motion can recall the motion.
On the motion to table.
Yeah. So anyone on the prevailing side can recall the motion if you want.
Dustin, Heidi, and Brian, either of you can, or any of the 3 of you can recall the motion. Brian, here you go. If you had a time machine, you can go back and revisit it. Come on.
That's what I wanted to do with that second one. How do I recall? Do I say I recall or I just restate it?
I honestly don't think that we can recall a motion that would undo a motion that we already voted on. Like, we could have recalled it before we took a vote to not issue the letter
right
of intent to withdraw. But we've already answered that question. The original motion to table was on the motion to issue the letter. And subsequently, we voted to not issue the letter.
I guess what I need to know from you, maybe
we could reconsider the vote to not issue the letter, but we can't. And I don't think we can re-examine the motion to table.
With the votes that you've had, what I feel the instructions to us would be is that we will complete the study, but that wouldn't mean that we would automatically put a vote to issue the letter of withdrawal on that same meeting. But if the information that we provided after we complete the study, which we said we would complete, gives you further direction, then we can schedule a subsequent meeting that would cover that letter of withdrawal, if that were the case. Otherwise, as Kane said, I think it was Kane, said that there's also the ability for someone who voted on the winning side of that vote could recall it if they wanted to. But otherwise, without that, that's the direction that I believe I've received from you.
Which is the same whether we do it procedurally or not.
Correct. That would be.
I think the net effect will be the same.
Any yes or no vote would have this same ability to be recalled.
Okay.
Sounds to me like we're at the spot where Councilmember Glover usually makes his motion.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, we are adjourned.